Chapter 198. Xiao Jian. When Qin Yiru saw the blood flowing down Yunjian's arm, she ran over in a panic, wanting to grab Yunjian's arm to stop the bleeding. Yunjian stopped her, shielding Qin Yiru behind her silently as she looked at the criminals who were all looking at her with watermelon knives in their hands. Those who were almost killed, but Yunjian's situation had attracted the criminals' attention. All of them took the chance to escape madly. Within seconds, there was no one left on the first floor. Except for the first few people who were killed on the ground and whose life or death situation was unknown. Since the mall only allowed entry and exit, meaning that there was only one entrance, the second, third, and fourth floors of the mall were crowded with people. It was not that these people were unwilling to leave. On the contrary, no one was willing to stay and watch the gory scene. In spite of it, none of them could escape. The only exit of the mall was now guarded by a group of murderous criminals. They could only squeeze upstairs with all their might, hoping to survive until the end and wait for the police to send someone to rescue them. Everyone was afraid that they would be caught and hacked to death by the criminals. Everyone was fearful in the face of death. From where they were trapped, they could see Yunjian's fair and tender arm clearly. Blood dripped onto the floor from the knife wound, connecting with the ghastly pool of blood on the ground. The girl, however, did not seem to feel any pain as she allowed the blood to flow from her arm. It was a sight that sent chills down one's spine. A group of 4 masked criminals in black made a few hand gestures and went for Yunjian with watermelon knives. It was obvious that this was a premeditated massacre. It was the peak hour of the mall, so there were many people walking around, to the point that it was crowded. The criminals had chosen to massacre people here because there were so many people here. 1 slash and 1 slash was enough to kill someone. The people here were all civilians. Even if someone was stabbed to death, no one dared to stop it because everyone was afraid that they would be killed. This fueled the criminals' desire to kill even more. Now, Yunjian had appeared out of nowhere. She had kicked one of the criminals' watermelon knives away and pulled Qin Yiru to avoid another one's stab. Judging by her skills just now, she was definitely not an ordinary person. Hence, the criminals went for Yunjian. They didn't know that they were slashing the blade of the Grim Reaper. There was no return. Slap. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Keeping Qin Yiru within her protective range, she extended her leg and stomped the handle of the watermelon knife that had fallen to the ground from the thug she had just kicked away. The watermelon knife bounced off the ground due to the rebound force. Yunjian reached out and caught the watermelon knife without even bending over. Xiao Jian. Xiao Jian. Qin Yiru called out in panic, as if realizing what Yunjian was about to do. Splat. With the sound of a knife stabbing into flesh, the criminal closest to Yunjian was stabbed to death by Yunjian in the next second. Yunjian, who had stabbed the criminal to death, did not panic like everyone had expected. On the contrary, she was calm as if she had just killed an ant. The other 3 criminals narrowed their eyes, but they still stabbed at Yunjian with their watermelon knives. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 sounds were heard, but the 3 criminals had yet to react. Yunjian did not even move from her spot. The 3 criminals collapsed on the spot as their throats were slit by the watermelon knives that Yunjian had flung out. Murder. This young lady had killed someone. She was so skilled. It was as if she had practiced it countless times. In spite of it, the people who witnessed the scene were not as frightened as they had expected. Instead, they breathed a sigh of relief. Chapter 199. In such a critical moment, no one dared to go against the criminals who were wielding watermelon knives. Everyone was thinking that it would be best for them to avoid the situation, but none of them considered that the criminals were not skilled in martial arts. Even if they were trained, there were only 4 of them. There were at least thousands of people who were running for their lives in the mall, if not tens of thousands. Among the thousands of people, there were plenty of men in the prime of their lives. However, no one dared to stand up against the criminals who were slaughtering innocent people. Human nature was the most fundamental manifestation of human nature in times of crisis. In the end, the one who stood up to save everyone was this underage girl who looked like she was not even 18 yet. While everyone breathed a sigh of relief, they could not help gawking at Yunjian. Xiao Jian, you. Qin Yiru was stupefied by Yunjian's murder just now. Her daughter who had always been sensible and obedient, had actually killed someone. Her Xiao Jian had actually killed someone. Killing people is against the law. Mom. Yunjian took a step closer to Qin Yiru and held Qin Yiru's trembling hand. Mom, if I didn't kill them just now, we'd be the ones who died. Qin Yiru looked at Yunjian as she shuddered. She opened her mouth, filled with doubts about Yunjian's behavior just now, but she could not get anything out of her. Yunjian was right. Moreover, from a legal point of view, if one killed the other party when one's life was threatened, it was considered self-defense and would not be punished. Xiao Jian, your hand is still bleeding. I'll take you to the hospital. Let's go to the hospital and get it bandaged. Qin Yiru suddenly felt something wet on the back of her hand. Looking down, she saw that the blood on Yunjian's arm was gushing down even more violently. She panicked, forgetting about what Yunjian had done just now as she pulled Yunjian out. Mom, hold on. A sharp glint flashed across Yunjian's pretty eyes as she patted the back of Qin Yiru's hand to comfort her. Qin Yiru was indeed stupefied. She had never encountered such a situation in her life. Yunjian, on the other hand, simply tore a corner of her shirt into a rectangular bandage and bit on the makeshift bandage made from the fabric, wrapping the bandage around the wound on her arm out of habit under everyone's gaze. The wound was not deep for Yunjian, but the cut was deep enough to see the flesh and bone. Yunjian took it without even blinking. The others were surprised as well. Such a deep wound, not to mention a little girl like her, even if it were an adult, who would be able to bandage their own wounds so habitually like her. Judging from the speed of his bandaging, it seemed like he had practiced it very well. How old was she? Just as everyone was thinking about this, Yunjian had finished bandaging her wound. She lifted her leg and walked up the stairs leading to the first floor and the second floor. The group of people on the second, third, and fourth floors were more or less afraid when they saw Yunjian, who had just killed the gangster, walking up the stairs. As a result, when Yunjian walked over, the group of people automatically squeezed to the side to make way for Yunjian. In the end, Yunjian came to a corner and pulled out a woman in luxurious clothes. You, what are you doing? The woman looked at Yunjian in fear. The moment she saw Yunjian, she thought of Yunjian's expression when she killed the gangster. Her heart trembled with fear. This woman was the culprit who pulled Qin Yiru and used her as a meat cushion when they were escaping and caused Yunjian's injury. I'm not planning to do anything. Yunjian looked at the woman with a smile. She smiled strangely, and in the next second, a fiery slap landed on the woman's face, making a loud noise in this place where no one dared to make noise. Chapter 200. Ah! The woman screamed. She was wearing a designer coat and carrying a Chanel bag. It was obvious that she was from a wealthy family. At this moment, she was slapped by Yunjian. Yunjian's slap was not light. After the woman was slapped, she coughed violently. Something seemed to have fallen from her gums. The woman covered her mouth and coughed desperately. It was a white tooth. This woman's tooth was broken by Yunjian. But seeing Yunjian do this, the people present did not even dare to fart. This little girl had just killed someone. She had killed someone. Who would dare to interfere in this matter? My tooth. When the woman saw that it was her white tooth that was exposed in her hand, she felt dizzy and almost screamed and fainted. The woman raised her eyes and glared at Yunjian fiercely. Then, she insulted her. Who do you think you are? Do you know who I am? How dare you hit me? Although the woman was afraid that Yunjian had just killed a few criminals, they were still criminals. They were criminals after all. If Yunjian did not kill them, they would kill more innocent people. The woman really did not believe that Yunjian would dare to kill her. Did she dare? Did she dare? Yunjian ignored the woman's evil words. She looked at the woman in disgust and said to her, "This slap is for my mother." As she spoke, Yunjian stood where she was and swung her hand to slap the woman's heavily made-up face again. Pfft. This slap was so strong that the woman, who did not react in time, spat out a few white teeth from her mouth. Yunjian's skills had improved by leaps and bounds because of the military training. Even her strength could not be compared to before. This slap was almost enough to knock out all the teeth in the woman's mouth. However, Yunjian knew that this was the woman's own fault. She should not have used her mother as a shield. She did not care about herself, but if something had really happened to Qin Yiru just now, or if she could not save her in time, Yunjian could not even begin to imagine the feeling of death that pierced her heart. I'm warning you with this slap. The next time I see you, you're dead. Yunjian spat out this sentence fiercely. At this moment, the woman's whole body trembled. She was originally very aggressive, but at this moment, she didn't even dare to let out a fart. She had a feeling that if she said another word in front of Yunjian, this little girl would really kill her. Just like how she had killed those criminals just now. After giving the woman 2 slaps, Yunjian went down from the 2nd floor. At this moment, a group of uniformed policemen and a group of armed special forces soldiers rushed in from the door. There were also ambulances rushing to the scene and immediately started to treat the casualties at the scene, as well as the people who were still alive. Among this group of special forces, Yunjian actually saw a familiar face. That was Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian and the others had received a notice that there were criminals brutally killing civilians here, so they hurried over. They had received orders from their superiors to immediately kill those criminals on the spot. However, they did not expect to see all the criminals dead the moment they entered the door. Unexpectedly, they also found Yunjian here. Yunjian and Gu Junjian exchanged glances. At this moment, a fat police officer holding a notebook and a pen walked in front of Yunjian and asked her, "What happened just now? Who killed these criminals?" The woman was still afraid of Yunjian and did not dare to say a word. Now that the policeman had appeared, she was confident again. She was no longer afraid of Yunjian and seemed to have forgotten Yunjian's warning. Chapter 201. The woman's words caused all the police officers, medical staff, and special forces soldiers to look at Yunjian in shock. Other than Gu Junjian, everyone who had just arrived was completely shocked. If it was said that these murderous gangsters were slashing at the crowd with knives, they were killed by a group of men at the scene. Even so, the group of professionals at the scene would still be shocked. After all, these criminals were holding watermelon knives in their hands. If an ordinary person fought against them with their bare hands, it would be very easy for them to be stabbed. It could even threaten their life at any time. However, what appeared in front of everyone's eyes was that other than the people who had collapsed on the ground floor, there was only Yunjian and Qin Yiru left in the lobby. There was also the group of 4 criminals. The criminals were all dead. Coincidentally, the cloth that was temporarily used as a bandage on Yunjian's arm was stained with bright red blood. It was obvious that she had just fought with the criminals. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. In addition, there was a group of people standing on the second, third, and fourth floor of the shopping mall. They were all trembling with fear. These criminals were really killed by this young girl who was not even 18 years old yet. In contrast to the group of people who were shocked, Gu Junjian was very calm. He even secretly cursed in his heart. This Yunjian was someone he had his eyes on. She was a special forces candidate that he had personally selected. She was the person who had killed the international top 10 assassin, Wolf Blade. Weren't these criminals looking for their own deaths when they encountered her? She killed someone. She killed someone. She even broke my teeth just now. You're the police, hurry up and arrest her. Put her in jail, put her in jail. The woman upstairs pointed at Yunjian as if she had gone crazy and screamed loudly. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She turned her head slightly and glanced at the woman with her sharp and vicious eyes. After the woman who was still screaming crazily received Yunjian's murderous gaze, her horrified voice immediately softened. Then, she shut her mouth and covered her broken teeth at the same time. Yunjian's gaze made her feel that if she said another word, Yunjian would dare to kill her even in front of the police. She was a demon. The woman shuddered in her heart. Cough, cough. The fat police officer raised the black pen in his hand and ordered Yunjian, "Little girl, it seems that you need to come with us." Xiao Jian. Qin Yiru grabbed Yunjian quickly and looked at the officer pleadingly. "Officer, can you let my daughter go to the hospital to treat her wound first?" Qin Yiru knew that they had to make a trip to the police station now that something like this had happened. Not only them, but all the witnesses present had to make a statement. However, Yunjian's wound was only bandaged with a simple cloth. She was only worried that her daughter's wound would become infected or continue to bleed. The fat police officer hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. "All right, follow the medical staff to the hospital first." Qin Yiru thanked him gratefully. "Thank you, officer." "Thank you." "All right, go quickly." The fat police officer waved his hand for Qin Yiru to bring Yunjian to the hospital first when he saw more blood stains on the cloth bandaged around Yunjian's arm. It was undeniable that the fat police officer was a kind-hearted person. After all, if Yunjian and Qin Yiru escaped or did not go to the police station, he would have to bear the responsibility. Yunjian, who came out of the hospital, had a new bandage on her arm and various ointments applied to it. Qin Yiru breathed a sigh of relief before they made their way to the police station. There were already a lot of people standing at the entrance of the police station. They were all witnesses of the crime scene. All of them still had lingering fears as they trembled when they made their statements in the police station. It was obvious that they had yet to recover from the shock. Chapter 202. When Gu Junjian saw Yunjian walking over with Qin Yiru, he glanced at the wound on her hand and asked, "Is your injury okay?" He had obviously heard from the other witnesses that Yunjian was injured because she was trying to save Qin Yiru. Otherwise, with Yunjian's skills, she would not have been injured at all. However, in that situation, Yunjian was able to save Qin Yiru from a knife that was inches away from her. Her skills were definitely top-notch. Just by listening to the witnesses, Gu Junjian knew that if he had been in Yunjian's shoes, even if he had used his own life to save Qin Yiru's life, or to push Qin Yiru away, he would not have been able to do so. Yunjian was indeed the person who had killed Wolf Blade, who was ranked 10th on the assassin ranking. "It's okay," Yunjian smiled lightly and introduced Qin Yiru to Gu Junjian. "This is my mother." "Oh." Gu Junjian looked at Qin Yiru curiously after hearing that. He saw that there was still a trace of lingering fear on her tired face. He just wanted to see who this woman was who could give birth to such an amazing daughter like Yunjian. "Mother, This is the captain of the military special forces. Yun Jian did not plan to hide anything as she pointed at Gu Junjian and immediately introduced him. She just did not point out that Gu Junjian was the captain of the advanced special forces. Advanced special forces soldiers were different from ordinary special forces soldiers. The advanced special forces that Gu Junjian was in was not only a team that directly belonged to the country, but more importantly, those who could enter the advanced special forces were definitely influential figures in the country. Gu Junjian was the captain of such a powerful team. Even so, in Qin Yiru's eyes, Gu Junjian was already a big shot. Qin Yiru was puzzled as to why her daughter knew such a big shot. She couldn't help but greet Gu Junjian politely, "Nice to meet you." Since it was someone her daughter knew, she could not refute Xiao Jian. Gu Junjian nodded. He also looked at Qin Yiru in a friendly manner and revealed a meaningful smile. "Yes, nice to meet you. Your daughter is very outstanding." Gu Junjian sighed from the bottom of his heart. Qin Yiru was also stunned. "You're here. It's your turn to give your statements. Come in." At this moment, the fat police officer saw that Yun Jian and Qin Yiru had returned, so he walked over to greet them. As a result, their conversation ended abruptly, and Yun Jian and Qin Yiru entered the police station. Gu Junjian followed them in as well. Gu Junjian was the captain of the advanced special forces. His position was high, so he could enter and leave the police station freely. The process of recording Yun Jian's statement was much more complicated than the other witnesses. After all, it was a fact that Yun Jian had killed someone. It was unknown what Gu Junjian had told the police officers, but Yun Jian left the station after giving her statement. She did not even have to deal with the tedious matters. Qin Yiru, who left the police station, was even more confused. She asked the same question she had just now, "Xiao Jian, how do you know such a big shot like the Special Forces officer?" Actually, Qin Yiru had many questions she wanted to ask. Why did her daughter change so much? "Mom, actually, I've joined the Special Forces. I'm already a candidate for the Special Forces." Yun Jian blinked and suddenly confessed when they walked past a deserted area with no one around. Chapter 203. What? "Xiao Jian, you've joined the Special Forces." Qin Yiru clutched her chest, stunned by the sudden news. Her eyes were trained on Yun Jian as she exclaimed in a raised pitch. Since Yun Jian had decided to come clean, there was no need for her to hide the truth anymore. She held Qin Yiru's hands and told her gently, "Mom, it's my own choice to join the Special Forces." Yun Jian's words had almost cleared up all of Qin Yiru's doubts. It even made Qin Yiru think that Yun Jian's sudden improvement in skills was due to her joining the Special Forces and training. Even Yun Jian's swift killing of the thugs just now was the result of her training in the Special Forces. Qin Yiru felt like she had found the source of all her doubts, but at the same time, she could not accept it all of a sudden. Yun Jian stood where she was, waiting for Qin Yiru to digest the truth. After a long time, Qin Yiru held Yun Jian's hands. She did not know how she should feel toward Yun Jian right now. Qin Yiru only felt that she was a failure as a mother. As a mother, she did not even know what her daughter had been doing recently. In spite of it, Qin Yiru still held Yun Jian's hands and told her in detail, "Xiao Jian, I don't object to you staying in the Special Forces, but you have to promise that nothing will happen to you. I know that it's dangerous, but you're not allowed to be in danger. Promise me and I won't stop you." Qin Yiru was not like some mothers who treated their children like treasure. She loved her child, but she respected her choice as well. Of course, this was on the premise that her child's life was guaranteed. Yun Jian knew that being a Special Forces soldier was dangerous at all times, but she nodded at Qin Yiru. "Mom, I promise I'll be fine." Being a Special Forces soldier was dangerous, but it paled in comparison to the various organizations she had to come into contact with in her past life. What was certain, however, was that she would return to her previous life's environment one day. Of course, the person who wanted her, slaying God, dead, was not born yet. Amen. Qin Yiro leaned toward Yunjian and rested her head softly beside Yunjian's before caressing Yunjian's forehead. To Qin Yiro, no matter how mature her Xiao Jian was, she was still a child. After returning to school, Yunjian had a few days of peace. It was just that there was a rumor in school recently that caused a commotion in the entire Longmen city. A talkative and lively boy in class bragged to the class after class as if he was there himself. My aunt was there when the criminals massacred the people in Northgate Mall. Wow, are you for real? I heard that a bunch of criminals charged in that day and hacked people with watermelon knives. Another student chimed in immediately. The incident caused an uproar in Longmen City as the students in school were discussing it as well. Of course it's true. My aunt said that she was standing on the 3rd floor at that time. She thought that she was done for, but guess what? In the end, they were all killed by a 15-year-old girl. F***ck, the girl's that strong. Someone else chimed in when the boy bragged just now. Yun Jian, the main character of the conversation who had just returned from the washroom, happened to pass by the students who were talking enthusiastically. Hey, Xiao Jian, I remember that you went to Northgate Mall to buy clothes with your mom that day too, right? Chen Xinyi was engrossed in the boy's story. She suddenly recalled that Yun Jian had told her that Yun Jian had accompanied her mother to Northgate Mall to buy clothes, so she mentioned it. Chapter 204. Hey, if that's the case, Yun Jian, you were there when the incident happened that day. One of the students couldn't hide his excitement and hurriedly asked Yun Jian. Everyone in the class wanted to know the answer to this question. Although the boy who was bragging just now said that his aunt was there, that was what he heard from his aunt. He didn't see it with his own eyes. If Yun Jian was really there at that time, then she must know the whole story clearly. In fact, Chen Xinyi also wanted to know what happened at the mall. However, she inadvertently made Yun Jian the center of attention in the class. She winked at Yun Jian apologetically. Yun Jian was in a good mood at the moment. She smiled back at Chen Xinyi and then looked into the pairs of expectant eyes in the class. She nodded and said, "That's right, I was there." Then hurry up and tell us. What happened that day? Could it be that those criminals really died in the hands of a 15-year-old girl? The student who couldn't hide his excitement asked Yun Jian again, his eyes shining with fascination. Yun Jian only smiled slightly. She pursed her lips and looked at the group of students who were especially curious about what happened that day. She raised her eyebrows and said, "If I said that I killed those criminals, would you believe me?" What? Hearing Yun Jian's words, everyone present turned pale with fright. She was the one who killed the criminals in the legends. Opening their eyes again, Yun Jian was indeed 15 or 16 years old. The girl who killed the criminals in the rumors was also around this age. Could it be that she really killed those criminals? Just kidding. In the next second, Yun Jian dissolved the tense atmosphere at the scene. Yun Jian's half-true and half-false words made the students present relax. However, if she really killed someone, how could she come back to school so quickly? Even if she didn't, she would be locked up by the police for a few days. The group of students immediately dispersed noisily. Chen Xinyi and Zhang Xiaofeng, on the other hand, ran over to surround Yun Jian after the group left. Jian, you must have killed those criminals, right? Chen Xinyi went to Yun Jian and asked softly. Zhang Xiaofeng, on the other hand, looked at Yun Jian with admiration. Yun Jian nodded subtly and looked at Zhang Xiaofeng, asking, "Did you train when I wasn't here?" "Yes. Of course, master, I've been training very hard. Zhang Xiaofeng, who was called out, put away his deep admiration for Yun Jian and flexed his muscles, gesturing at Yun Jian in a funny way. Zhang Xiaofeng and Chen Xinyi were slowly getting used to Yun Jian's unbelievable performance. After all, the two of them had witnessed enough of the things that had happened before. So, master, when are you going to teach me something better? Zhang Xiaofeng gestured again and went up to her with a grin. We'll talk about it after you've mastered the chopstick throwing. Yun Jian pressed her lips together slightly and smiled subtly. Chopstick throwing was a skill she had Zhang Xiaofeng practice. It was actually very simple. He placed an empty beer bottle on the ground and got Zhang Xiaofeng to toss the empty beer bottles in the distance with his chopsticks. Toss one beer bottle after another would count. The movement sounded simple, but when Zhang Xiaofeng practiced it more and could easily throw the chopsticks into empty beer bottles far away, his basic skill would be more or less there. Although the movement sounded simple, many moves were closely related to it. Especially when it came to firearms, aiming was the most important point. Just like chopstick throwing, one throw and one go in would be accurate, while a gun required one to aim and shoot. Chapter 205. Oh. Zhang Xiaofeng was disappointed when he heard that he had to practice throwing chopsticks again. However, he understood that the basics were not something that could be learned overnight. Hence, he started thinking about how to improve the accuracy of his chopstick throwing. Chen Xinyi made a funny face in the direction where Zhang Xiaofeng was walking. Then, she turned around and looked at Yun Jian with a smile. She stuck out her tongue and looked extremely cute. Coincidentally, the bell rang to signal the start of class. Thus, the group of students who had gathered together to gossip about various trivial matters returned to their seats. The teacher quickly carried a stack of textbooks into the classroom. Yun Jian lived a comfortable life again. Now that Qin Yira knew that she was training at the military training camp, she could go to the camp openly on the weekends. At this moment, it was not long before her first mission in a month. Today, Yun Jian was sweating profusely from the high-difficulty training. After returning from the military training camp with Chu Ning and the rest, they agreed to go to a high-class clubhouse to party for a while. However, they were stopped by a high-class sports car. Seeing the person in the car, Yun Jian frowned deeply. Him. Yun Jian knew the person in the car. She had met him once after her rebirth. This person was one of the 4 leaders of the Inhun organization, Shuang. Shuang was Siyi's subordinate. Logically speaking, Shuang should not know her since she had been reborn. However, he actually came all the way from country M to country Z to look for her. What did this mean? Who are you? Can you move the car? You're blocking our way. Chu Ning said when she saw Shuang suddenly driving a sports car in the middle of the road. It was normal for her to say this. After all, this was a pedestrian area. Shuang deliberately drove the car here to block their way. Of course, Chu Ning did not know that Yun Jian knew Shuang. Hence, she said this. I'm looking for her. Shuang frowned slightly. His slender finger pointed in the direction of Yun Jian, and an innate murderous aura shocked everyone present. The 4 leaders of the Inhun organization were all handsome and dashing, and they were all quite young. This was what Yun Jian knew. I know him. Yun Jian remained silent for 2 seconds before speaking to Chu Ning and the others. Why don't you guys leave first? I won't be going to the party. Yun Jian knew that Shuang wouldn't come looking for her for no reason. Furthermore, it had been a long time since Siyi went to the ancient tomb, and there was still no news of her. Hence, she spoke to Chu Ning and the others. Ah. You're not going. Chu Ning muttered, then pursed her lips and said, all right. Yun Jian nodded and got into Shui Ying's sports car. Shuang drove the sports car into the distance. Finally, it stopped at a quiet and deserted place. Did something happen to him? Yunjian didn't wait for Shuang to speak and asked hurriedly. She didn't even notice the nervousness in her voice. Shuang frowned and nodded at Yunjian. Then, he said, young master entered the ancient tomb in the south with Adam and Immerse senator not long after. We lost contact with him. Our communication device was cut off. We can't contact him. Shuang sounded serious and nervous when he said this. How long has he been in the ancient tomb? Yunjian didn't care why Shuang came looking for her after Ce went missing. She asked hurriedly. About 10 days. They prepared food when they went in. But if they don't come out after a long time, I'm afraid. Shuang didn't continue. However, even Shuang, one of the 4 leaders of an Hun organization, was so serious. Yunjian knew that this matter was serious. The sandalwood box and the ancient tomb in the south. What secrets did it hold? She gritted her teeth, paused, and said to Shuang, I'll go back and prepare. Do you want to go to the ancient tomb with me? Chapter 206. Shuang frowned. He looked at Yunjian and said, I have to stay in the organization. Ce had told him before that even if something happened to him, Shuang had to stay in the organization in case someone took advantage of the situation. Actually, Shuang did not come to Yunjian because of Ce's instructions. He knew that Ce had no intention of hiding anything from Yunjian. A woman that could catch the eye of his young master would naturally not be an ordinary person. That was why Shuang came to Yunjian to ask for help. And obviously, Yunjian did not disappoint Shuang. At this moment, Shuang suddenly felt that Yunjian and his young master were a perfect match. Okay. Yunjian nodded. Yunjian naturally knew what Shuang meant. He had to stay in the Hun organization because the Hun organization was similar to the Kosha mercenaries. Once all the leaders were not in the organization, those who were hiding in the dark would take action at any time. Yunjian did not expect herself to go to the southern country so suddenly. But when she heard that something had happened to Ce, she could not sit still. A muffled voice in her heart told her that she had to find him. If he was alive, she had to see him. If he was dead, she had to see his corpse. When Yunjian came back to her senses, she had already driven her LoveLore sports car to Country A, which was the southern country, was the location of the ancient tomb where the sandalwood box was excavated. As for the few days that she disappeared, she asked Gujunjian to lie to Qin Yiro on her behalf. She lied that the army wanted to train the group of special forces candidates better and that they would undergo long-term close training. Even the school had reported it. Yunjian took the detailed map that she got from Shuang and drove her car at the speed of light. She did not drive to Country Z. Instead, she parked her car at the provincial airport and bought a ticket to Country A. It was already 4:00 in the afternoon when the ancient tomb of the sandalwood box was excavated in Country A, which was a relatively poor country. She rushed to the ancient tomb without stopping. The ancient tomb was located in a deep ravine. When Yunjian arrived, she could see many tents set up around it. Yunjian carried a lot of things she had prepared in advance and was about to enter the tomb. Little girl, wait. Suddenly, a deep voice stopped Yunjian in her tracks. Yunjian turned around to look. He saw a solemn middle-aged man standing in front of him. This man held a lot of archaeological equipment in his hands and wore a pair of glasses on the bridge of his nose. Looking at the group of people standing behind the middle-aged man, as well as their attire and appearance, there was no doubt that they were an archaeological team. The appearance of the sandalwood box and the rumor that the ancient tomb was only accessible attracted experts and scholars from all over the world, as well as archaeologists. Even famous figures from all over the world came one after another. However, not many people entered the tomb. There was even a large group of people from all over the world stationed here, but very few actually dared to enter the tomb. Naturally, he was afraid that once he entered the tomb, he would not be able to come out. It was just like the previous few batches of people who entered the tomb and never came out again. Just now, the middle-aged man called out to Yunjian in Chinese, so it was obvious that he was from country Z. However, the middle-aged man looked at Yunjian and asked, "Little girl, you are from country Z, right?" Yunjian nodded slightly. Chapter 207. The Flying Dragon Archaeological Team enjoyed a great reputation in country Z. Even some people who weren't in the circle knew about them. Yu Bufan and the group of people behind him were the members of the mysterious Flying Dragon Archaeological Team. Although Yunjian wasn't in the circle, she had heard about the Flying Dragon Archaeological Team. She nodded at Yu Bufan and said, "That's right, I want to enter the tomb." When Yunjian said this, not only Yu Bufan, but also the group of teammates behind him gasped. Did this little girl not know about the situation here or what? She actually said that she wanted to enter the tomb in such a relaxed tone. Didn't she know about the rumor of only entering and not leaving in the ancient tomb? Little girl, are you alone? Yu Bufan swallowed his saliva and asked. Actually, when Yu Bufan saw Yunjian carrying a bulging backpack just now, he casually guessed that she wanted to enter the tomb. He didn't expect her to really enter the tomb. And she was alone. My name is Yunjian. I'm alone. Yunjian wasn't in a hurry to leave as she said this to Yu Bufan. It was her first time here, so she could get a feel of the situation here. However, there was one thing that she could guarantee. She would definitely go down this tomb. Ahem, haven't you heard of the rumor about the ancient tomb? We've been stationed here for a long time. Many people have entered the tomb, but none of them have come out alive. Even so, do you still want to enter? Yu Bufan kindly reminded her. If Yunjian wasn't from country Z, Yu Bufan might not have stopped Yunjian. He just didn't want to see people making unnecessary sacrifices. Yes, I have to enter. Yunjian agreed with Yu Bufan. The reason why she had to enter was firstly because of CE, and secondly because the ancient tomb contained the secret of the sandalwood box. It wasn't that she didn't want to know the reason why she was reborn. She, too, was very eager to find the answer. If she could be reborn, then if she found the secret of her rebirth, would she be able to revive her brother? Although this was just empty talk, Yunjian was willing to give it a try. She had even encountered such a rare thing like being reborn. Perhaps her brother could be revived too. Alright, if you really want to enter the tomb, I have 2 friends here who are going to enter the tomb tomorrow. If you don't mind, you can go with them. Yu Bufan said. In order to prove that he was not a liar, he deliberately explained, it's like this. My 2 friends have been waiting here for several days. They have already gathered a group of people who want to go into the tomb together. Since you all want to go into the tomb, and we don't know what will happen when we enter the tomb, my friends plan to gather a group of people to go together. This way, we can take care of each other. Yu Bufan didn't mention that his friends' were. This was Yuz's group's C. Teams 4 team. Yu Bufan was overjoyed when he heard this. He hurriedly brought Yunjian to find his 2 friends. Although Yunjian didn't look powerful, it was always good to have one more person as a guarantee and a sense of security. Yu Bufan's 2 friends were about the same age as him. When they saw Yunjian, they expressed their goodwill towards her. Yu Bufan's 2 friends were one tall and one short. The tall and thin one was called Bojan, while the short and fat one was called Fu Axan. Chapter 208. Nice to meet you, welcome to the team. Bo Zhan extended his hand to welcome Yunjian. Yunjian nodded slightly, not intending to shake his hand. Bo Zhan did not feel awkward and changed the topic. The rest of the team will be exploring the area around the tomb tomorrow. They'll be back soon. Not long after he said that, a group of 5 to 6 people appeared in front of them. Bo Zhan pointed at Yunjian and introduced her to them. You guys are back. This is Yunjian, she's our new partner. She'll be going into the tomb with us tomorrow. Oh my god. She's going into the tomb. Before Bo Zhan could finish, he was interrupted by a woman who was dressed up to the nines. The woman looked surprised. She looked at Yunjian from head to toe a few times before sighing to Yunjian. Little girl, are you 18 years old this year? The woman made a tsk sound as she spoke. Yunjian glanced at the woman and ignored her. The woman stood out among the group of men. After all, she was the only woman in the group who was going into the tomb. The woman's name was Enchanting. It was a nice name and her facial features were not bad. However, she looked unnatural because of the pink and green foundation and eyeliner on her face. More importantly, Enchanting's body had a strong pungent perfume smell, which made it hard for people to like her. Plus, her tone of voice was even more repulsive. It was just that Enchanting did not think that way. When she saw Yunjian ignoring her, she was infuriated. It was because Yunjian was the only girl in the group, so Enchanting wanted to find a temporary friend who would not make her look like she was walking alone. That was why she talked to Yunjian. She did not expect Yunjian to be so disrespectful. Enchanting was not a pushover either. She immediately muttered to Yunjian in front of everyone, "Tsk. Who do you think you are? Why do you insist on following us when you're so arrogant and powerful? If you have the guts, go to the tomb by yourself." Enchanting was a typical, "if you don't obey me, I won't let you have an easy time," kind of person. However, her words did not provoke Yunjian in the slightest. "Enchanting, can't you behave yourself?" A handsome 27 or 28 years old man standing next to Enchanting growled at her in a low voice. Then, the man looked at Yunjian apologetically and said, "Little girl, I apologize on her behalf. Please don't mind what she said. Ling Tianhao, how dare you scold me for someone else? I didn't do anything wrong." Enchanting saw the man apologize to Yunjian. Her face changed and she couldn't help shouting. The man called Ling Tianhao frowned. His disgust for Enchanting disappeared in a flash. Other than Yunjian, everyone present knew that Enchanting and Ling Tianhao were a couple. However, what they did not know was that Enchanting's love for Ling Tianhao was one-sided. The reason why Ling Tianhao agreed to be with Enchanting was that he and Enchanting's brother were both soldiers. They were good friends and comrades in arms. Once, they were on a mission together. Enchanting's brother sacrificed himself to save Ling Tianhao. At the same time, he entrusted his sister, Enchanting, to Ling Tianhao. Ling Tianhao could not bear to refuse, so he stayed with Enchanting for 3 years. In these 3 years, he did not develop any feelings for Enchanting. Instead, he hated her more and more. Chapter 209. Yunjian glanced at Ling Tianhao and Enchanting. She could guess their relationship. She ignored Enchanting's aggressive words and replied to Ling Tianhao, "I don't care about the howling of a mad dog." She didn't come here to quarrel with them, so she didn't care about Enchanting's behavior. Enchanting was even angrier. She pointed at Yunjian and was about to walk over. She rolled up her sleeves and pretended to fight. "You called me a dog. How dare you call me a dog? You." "Enough. Enchanting, do you still want to go to the tomb with us? If you say one more word, you can go home." Ling Tianhao yelled at Enchanting in the next second. At the same time, Ling Tianhao forcefully dragged Yi Yunting away to prevent the conflict from escalating. The rest of the people looked at each other. They were all dissatisfied with Yi Yunting. After Ling Tianhao dragged Yi Yunting away, Yun Jian got to know the rest of them as well. She also knew that they were with Ling Tianhao. Actually, we are special forces. The man who just went over there is also one of our teammates. His name is Ling Tianhao. He was ordered to go into the tomb to investigate the situation. The man in the military posture smiled bitterly as he spoke. The man who looked like a soldier was called Sun Jianxiong. Sun Jianxiong waved his hand with a bitter smile. He waved his hand in the direction where Ling Tianhao and Yi Yunting were walking. Then he sighed and said, "Sigh, Tianhao is such a good person. How could he be involved in such a thing? When old Yi left, he shouldn't have entrusted his sister to." Sun Jianxiong sighed. At this moment, a tall and sturdy man elbowed him in the stomach and interrupted him. "Old Sun, don't talk so much. Be careful that Yi Yunting doesn't hear you. She'll make a scene again." Fine. It's useless to say more. I won't talk anymore." Sun Jianxiong smiled awkwardly and turned to ask Yun Jian, "Oh right, little girl, why do you want to go to the tomb? You can't enter the tomb unless you have no other choice. It's very dangerous inside." Sun Jianxiong had good intentions, but Yun Jian smiled and interrupted him. She said, "My name is Yun Jian. I have a reason why I have to enter." Since Yun Jian said so, they didn't ask anything more. Yun Jian had also figured out the situation of this group of people. Bo Zhan and Fu Axian were together. They were both members of the Flying Dragon archaeological team and friends of Yu Bufan. The two of them heard that the tomb was dangerous, so they gathered people to go down the tomb with them. That was how they met Ling Tianhao, Sun Jianxiong, and the others. Other than Yi Yunting, who was forced to come along, Ling Tianhao and the others were members of a special force from Z country. They were going into the tomb to carry out their mission. Yun Jian knew that there were many special forces in country Z, but not many of them could be classified as advanced special forces. As for whether they were related to Gu Junjian, there was nothing to say. Yi Yunting and Ling Tianhao came back when the sky was dark. She didn't know how Ling Tianhao comforted Yi Yunting, but both of them had calmed down by the time they came back. They set up a tent for Yun Jian and then went to pack their things. These things were naturally necessary for the trip to the tomb the next day. Yun Jian also took out the things in her backpack and counted them. "Hey, look, there's another car coming." At this moment, a tall and large off-road vehicle drove over in an overbearing manner, flashing past in front of everyone. There was a huge unique skull on the front of the SUV, which attracted everyone's attention. The one who spoke was Sun Jianxiong. Bo Zhan's eyes widened as he watched the off-road vehicle drive past. He was currently pointing at the SUV's tracks and exclaiming softly, Isn't that Gu Sha mercenary's car? I can't be wrong about the symbol on the car. No one would dare to imitate that symbol." As soon as he said this, everyone was horrified. Chapter 210. Kosha Mercenaries. It was the international mercenary organization that was famous all over the world. Ling Tianhao, Sun Jianxiong, and the rest's expressions changed upon hearing Bo Zhan's words. Yun Jian raised her eyebrows slightly. Of course, she saw the logo on the car. It was undoubtedly Kosha mercenaries. However, it was too dark for her to see clearly who was in the car. What Kosha mercenaries? Yi Yunting raised her eyebrows in disdain and asked. It's just a small organization. Look at how scared you are. It's not like we're in a sci-fi movie. Yi Yunting mumbled. Yi Yunting was a typical lady who was raised in her boudoir. Naturally, she had never heard of international assassin organizations. That was why she scoffed when she saw the terrified expression on everyone's faces when they heard about Kosha mercenaries. Sun Jianxiong and the rest almost slapped Yi Yunting when they heard what she said. It would be fine if Yi Yunting said that to them. If she said that in front of Kosha mercenaries, not only would she die, but all of them would die with her. Yi Yunting, shut up. It was the first time Sun Jianxiong yelled at Yi Yunting, who had nothing to do with him. Kosha mercenaries. We can't afford to offend them. Yi Yunting, you better restrain yourself. Otherwise, you don't have to come with us. Even the usually calm Fu Axayan threatened Yi Yunting. With that, no one gave Yi Yunting an explanation. However, Yi Yunting really shut her mouth after hearing what everyone said. She was really afraid that Bo Zhan and Fu Axayan would refuse to bring her along. Even if Ling Tianhao wanted to bring her along, there was nothing he could do. However, Yi Yunting did not stop there. She could not help but grit her teeth in grievance. What Kosha mercenaries? How could they be so powerful? She did not believe it. Everyone, pack up and rest early. We'll enter the tomb tomorrow morning. Bo Zhan said with a frown. After everyone heard this, they immediately dispersed. Yun Jian, on the other hand, only slightly hid her lip gloss. She didn't know who from the Kosha mercenaries was sitting in the off-road vehicle. Perhaps he would be able to meet them after entering the tomb. Therefore, Yun Jian went back to the tent after checking the things in the bag. He had a dreamless night. The next day, at 4 or 5 o'clock, autumn turned to winter. The sun had not risen yet, and the sky was pitch black. Yun Jian turned over and got out of bed. By the time Bo Zhan and the rest woke up, Yun Jian was already done with her morning training and had put on all her equipment. Let's gather and depart, Bo Zhan said once everyone was awake. Bo Zhan then bade farewell to Yu Bufan and the rest, and the group headed towards the ancient tomb. Yun Jian walked at the back of the group. She had been observing the surroundings along the way. When they arrived at the entrance of the tomb, it was already 8:30 in the morning. What appeared in front of them was a dried-up well. When the ancient tomb was excavated, it was found in a dried-up well. Therefore, there was only one way to enter the tomb, and that was to go down this deep dried-up well. Who's going first? Bo Zhan asked after tying the rope. Yi Yunting, since you're so good, why don't you go first? Sun Jianxiong suggested as he saw that Yi Yunting was unhappy. I. Yi Yunting shuddered violently. She looked at the dried-up well fearfully and took 2 steps back. Of course, she would not be the first to enter the tomb. Suddenly, she had an idea and pointed at Yun Jian. You're the last to join us, of course you should go first. The first person to enter the tomb might accidentally trigger the mechanism, so Yi Yunting would rather die than be the first to enter. I'll go first, Bo Zhan said. I'll go first. Yun Jian's eyes flickered. She walked over and pulled the rope. Without any hesitation, she stood in front of the dried-up well and jumped in swiftly. Everyone was stunned as well. After all, the warning that no one who enters the tomb will survive was still there. Who could guarantee that those who entered the tomb would not be killed on the spot by the mechanism? Chapter 2:11. Although that was what everyone thought, after Yun Jian, Bo Zhan led them into the tomb one by one. Yi Yunting was pushed into the well by Ling Tianhao. She wanted to give up when she saw how deep the well was. However, Ling Tianhao pulled her down mercilessly and she followed suit. At the same time, Yun Jian turned on the flashlight as she was the first to enter the tomb. She looked around and found that there was a secret passage at the bottom of the well. She raised her head and looked at the top of the well, but all she saw was darkness. Even the sun couldn't shine through. She could not even see Beaujean and the rest who were standing outside the well, let alone hear their voices. It was very strange. However, Yunjian did not have to wait long before Beaujean and the rest came down one by one. How is it? Is there a way out? Beaujean asked Yunjian after he came down. At the same time, he was fiddling with the communicator in his hand. The signal was full. There's only one way. Yunjian pointed at the only passage in front of them and said. They're all down. Let's go then. Beaujean turned on the flashlight he had prepared and let Yunjian keep hers while he led the way. Yunjian did not intend to stand out. She turned off the flashlight and followed behind Beaujean. Are we really leaving? This place is so dark, and it's so narrow and small. Enchanting swallowed her saliva in fear and looked around cautiously. Now you know how to be afraid. You insisted on following us and said you were not afraid of anything. Now you know how to be afraid. It's too late. Sun Jianxiong could not stand it and rebuked Enchanting. All right, stop talking. Let's keep up. Ling Tianhao mediated in time. He did not wait for Enchanting and followed the group. Enchanting saw that Ling Tianhao had left and quickly followed. The secret passage was very narrow and small. It was only enough for one person to walk through with a bent back. It was difficult for people who were too big to walk. Although Fu Axian was fat, it was not to the point where it was strenuous for him. Stay close. Beaujean took the lead and instructed the people behind him as he heard the sound of wind blowing. The ground was covered with a thick layer of mud. Along the way, there were many footprints on the mud. Obviously, there were many people who had entered the tomb, but none of the footprints led to the outside. After walking for about 10 minutes, Yunjian found that the deeper they went, the wider the narrow secret passage became. In the end, not only were they able to stand up straight, they could even feel the vastness in their arms. Wait, there's no way out. At the end of the journey, Beaujean realized that he was surrounded by walls made of mud and rocks. There was no longer a path to continue moving forward. What? Wasn't this the only entrance? How could there be no road just like that? Did you guys go the wrong way? You're leading the way. Enchanting shouted in surprise. There's a trap. Beaujean frowned and turned to look at his assistant, Fu Axian. Old Axian, help me find the trap. As he spoke, Beaujean took out a bunch of tools from his backpack. Beaujean and Fu Axian were experts in tomb raiding, so they were experts in finding traps. Ling Tianhao, Sun Jianxiong and the rest naturally did not know this, so they just stood there and waited. Before Beaujean could take out the tools from his backpack, a young girl's melodious voice was heard. You don't have to look for it. Yunjian then walked to a corner in front and continued, the trap is here. You know where it is. Hee, don't mess around, all right. Who do you think you are? You're so awesome. You. Enchanting already had a lot of opinions about Yunjian. Now, it was as if she had caught Yunjian's weakness. She started babbling. Boom! At the same time, Yunjian had arrived at the corner. She brushed away some of the mud on the ground, revealing a small trap. Chapter 2:12. The mechanism was activated, and the passageway appeared. Enchanting's mouth, which had been scolding Yunjian, fell silent in an instant. Her actions just now were like a clown jumping ship. It was hilarious and ridiculous. Yunjian, how did you know there was a mechanism here? Beaujean was the first to ask Yunjian. There was still a trace of surprise and astonishment on his face. The soil here shows signs of loosening. Someone must have opened the mechanism before us. It's not hard to find it. Yun Jian explained and used the soil to cover the mechanism. This. If someone had opened the mechanism before, why did you cover it up? Also, why did you cover it up too? Ling Tianhao asked, puzzled. Those who came here naturally didn't want anyone to enter the tomb before them and fight with them for the treasures in the tomb. Yun Jian grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. She smiled gently and explained, me too. Actually, that was not the reason why she covered the mechanism up. Bo Zhan and Fu Axian were both expert grave robbers and experts in studying all kinds of mechanisms in tombs. Although both of them heard Yun Jian's answer, they were still secretly shocked. The mechanisms in the tomb were all interconnected. If the person who entered the tomb covered the switches, there must be a reason for it. The least they could do was to avoid triggering any dangerous traps. Both of them were not surprised by Yun Jian's clever explanation. They looked at Yun Jian a few more times. This 15-year-old girl, whom they thought was the weakest in the group, was not simple at all. Cough cough. Let's go down. Bo Zhan held the torchlight and went down first. Yun Jian followed him again. Then, the group continued walking. Boom, the strange thing was, when Enchanting was the last one to go down the tunnel, the mechanism behind her closed up automatically. Ah! The mechanism closed up on its own. How can this be? It closed up on its own. How are we going to get out? Is this place really like what the rumors say? It's only entry and not exit. What should we do? Are we going to die here? Enchanting was so frightened that she screamed. Her whole body was trembling and her voice was getting shriller and more terrified. Shut up. If you scream again, I'll kill you first. Yun Jian suddenly turned her head and glared at Enchanting from the spacious staircase. Enchanting felt a chill run down her spine, and she didn't dare to make a sound in the pitch-black underground tunnel. Yun Jian suddenly became fierce because she heard voices coming from an open space at the bottom of the stairs. That's right, it was a human voice. That was why she had fiercely ordered Enchanting to shut up. What's wrong? Did you find anything? Bo Zhan turned to look at Yun Jian and asked. Bo Zhan no longer treated Yun Jian as a child after she had discovered the mechanism at first glance. Although the mechanism was eye-catching, even Bo Zhan, a famous tomb raider, could not spot it at first glance. It was obvious that Yun Jian was not an ordinary person. There's someone downstairs, Yun Jian said with her eyes downcast. She then walked past Bo Zhan and hurried down the stairs. Is he down there? There's someone down there. How come we didn't hear anything? Sun Jianxiong was stunned. That's because your ears aren't working well, the burly man next door replied to Sun Jianxiong with a smile. The group continued to walk down until they reached an open space. Who would have thought that at the bottom of the dry well, after the mechanism was activated, there would be a secret passage leading downwards. After going down the stairs, there was an open space that was as big as a quarter of a basketball court. At this moment, there were two groups of people gathered here. Yun Jian did not find the person she was looking for when she fixed her gaze on them. Chapter 213. Yun Jian was visibly disappointed. It was within her expectations to see these people with skull markings on their arms. They were from the Kosha mercenaries, the same group that drove the off-road vehicle last night. Yun Jian glanced at them and did not recognize them. This was normal. Yun Jian was the boss of the Kosha mercenaries. Other than Snake, Lizard, Tiger, Leopard, and some high-ranking members of the Kosha mercenaries, she did not know any of the other members in her past life. Just like Su Zetian. He was the mafia boss of Longmen City and his status in Longmen City was unquestionable. However, he might not even be ranked in the Koshia mercenaries, let alone be recognized by Yunjian. It was a fact that these people were from the Koshia mercenaries with the skull markings on their arms. However, it was certain that they were not high-ranking members. As for the other group of people, they were all burly men in their prime. Their identities and origins were unknown. In contrast to Yunjian, the other group of people, as well as Bojan and the rest, paled when they saw the Koshia mercenaries with skull markings on their arms. They had actually bumped into the Koshia mercenaries. Tsk. How lively. At this moment, the man standing at the front with the skull imprint on his arm laughed twice, and his sharp eyes turned fierce. This man was a member of the Koshia mercenaries, codenamed Bear. Might. Every member of the Koshia mercenaries had their own codenames and did not reveal their real names. Bear. Might was not a high-ranking member of the Koshia mercenaries, nor was he on the top of the list. However, he could still be ranked in the top 99 of the Koshia mercenaries. This was enough for him to be arrogant in the underworld. Every member of the Koshia mercenaries would be ranked according to their ability. Usually, the top 20 would be occupied by the high-ranking members, while the top 50 would be the super elites of the Koshia mercenaries. Those who could be ranked in the top 100 of the Koshia mercenaries could already be arrogant in the underworld. Even someone like Su Zetian could only be ranked in the tens of thousands of the Koshia mercenaries. One could only imagine Bear Might's status. As long as he did not encounter any terrifying characters, it was enough for him to show off. Where are you guys from? Bear Might swept his gaze across the crowd, his murderous aura making everyone lower their heads as they trembled in fear. We. Even Bojan and Fu Axayan had to soften their stance under Bear Might's oppression. But at this moment, Yi Yunting's desperate voice sounded again. They're from the Koshia mercenaries, I think they're no big deal. They're all humans with a pair of eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Yi Yunting had been suppressing her anger and had nowhere to vent it. Seeing how everyone was so fearful of this Gu Sha mercenaries man, she had forgotten all about Sun Jianxiong, Fu Axayan, and the rest's warning to her. In order to stand out and be the center of attention, Yi Yunting spoke up. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and stood at the side in silence. Bear Might's cheerful expression darkened instantly after he heard Yi Yunting's belittling. Although he was arrogant, he could not bear to see others bad-mouthing the Koshia mercenaries. He immediately took out a Browning pistol from his pocket and pointed it at Yi Yunting, roaring, F***CKU, how dare you insult the dignity of the Koshia mercenaries. Bojan and the rest gasped at the sight of Bear Might taking out his pistol in a fit of rage. Everyone was cursing Yi Yunting for being blind and regretting agreeing to let such a foolish woman like Yi Yunting join them. Yi Yunting was so frightened that she knelt on the ground. When she saw the shiny pistol in Bear Might's hand, she was so scared that she was on the verge of collapsing. She finally understood that the few words she had casually said had brought disaster upon herself. Ah, gun. Gun. Yi Yunting's expression changed and she stepped back. How dare you insult the Koshia mercenaries, I'll send you all to hell with this bitch. Bear Might reloaded the gun domineeringly and glared at Yun Jian, Bojan, Fu Axayan, Ling Tianhao, and the rest. If Yi Yunting said something wrong, it would implicate everyone else. This was the reason why everyone was afraid of offending the Koshia mercenaries. Chapter 214. Just when everyone was frightened by the scene in front of them and thought that they were all going to die because of that B***tch Yi Yunting, a gentle voice came from behind them. A light female voice was heard. It's up to you whether you want to kill Yi Yunting or not, but don't even think about touching the others. Yun Jian looked at Bear Might and stared straight at him. She was not intimidated by his aura at all. Beau Jean and the rest were indeed no match for Bear. Might. Bear. Might was also an assassin, although he was not ranked on the international assassin chart. However, in front of Beau Jean and the rest, to be honest, killing them was like squashing a bunch of ants. This was the strength of the Kosha mercenaries. A member of the Kosha mercenaries could fight against 100 people at once. Yunjian, how dare you ask him to kill me? How can you be so vicious? Do you have a conscience? If we didn't bring you in, you probably wouldn't even be able to enter this place. And now you're abandoning me. Yi Yunting was really scared when she heard that and started to curse at Yunjian. She did not even think about how she had failed to bully Yunjian and forced her to do so. And who are you? Bear. Might ignored Yi Yunting's words and looked straight at Yunjian. His instincts told him that this girl was not simple. Even Beau Jean and the rest of the men would sweat and tremble in fear when they saw their guns pointed at them. Yunjian was not moved at all. On the contrary, she stood out to vouch for the rest. Bear. Might was arrogant, but he always remembered that he was a member of the Kosha mercenaries. How could Bear? Might, who was able to squeeze into the top 100 of the Kosha mercenaries, be a decisive person who would kill without knowing the background of the other party? If that was the case, he would not have survived until now. We are not enemies. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and looked at Bear. Might from the side and replied. After saying that, she turned around and walked towards Yi Yunting under everyone's gazes. What are you doing? Yi Yunting took 2 steps back, looking at Yunjian who was walking toward her with a menacing aura. Yi Yunting retreated step by step until she reached a corner and could no longer retreat. Has anyone ever told you that you can't afford to offend the Kosha mercenaries? Yunjian gave a sinister smile. It was extremely creepy. Yi Yunting backed away in fear, shaking her head as she looked at the shiny gun in Bear Might's hand and cried out fearfully, I'm wrong, I'm really wrong. Yunjian, plead for mercy for me. Save me, I can't die. Yi Yunting thought that Yunjian was planning to sacrifice herself to protect herself and the others. Of course, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course. It was only at this moment that Yi Yunting reacted. Any member of Gu Sha mercenaries could pull out a pistol and kill anyone they wanted. This organization was definitely not the small one she had mentioned earlier. Save you. The dignity of the Kosha mercenaries is not something you can slander. Yunjian curled her lips. She looked at the frightened Yi Yunting and narrowed her eyes. The Kosha mercenaries. Could it be that Yunjian was a member of the Kosha mercenaries? After hearing Yunjian's words, everyone widened their eyes and stared at her in shock. She was actually a member of the Kosha mercenaries. How old was she? Even Bear Might and the others were completely dumbfounded. Yunjian looked at Bear Might and said, how do you deal with outsiders slandering the Kosha mercenaries? It was an absolute order. Yunjian was born with the aura of a king. Even Xiongwei, who was aggressive just now, did not know about Yunjian's identity and status and was willing to yield. Chapter 2:15. Anyone who slandered the Kosha mercenaries will be killed without mercy. Yunjian repeated. She stared at Yi Yunting with a murderous look in her eyes. She was the one who set this rule. So, why don't you do it? Yunjian turned her head and ordered Bear Might. Bear Might and his men were completely stunned on the spot. Logically speaking, Yunjian and Yi Yunting were on the same side. Now that Yi Yunting had slandered the Kosha mercenaries, this little girl not only claimed to be a member of the Kosha mercenaries, but also asked him to kill Yi Yunting who had entered the tomb with her. Yi Yunting was completely shocked. She did not expect Yunjian to be a member of the Kosha mercenaries. In spite of it, Enchanting did not forget to ask for help. Seeing that Yunjian's pleas were futile, she scrambled to Ling Tianhao and tugged at his pants, wailing, "Tianhao, save me, save me. They have guns, they're going to kill me. I don't have a brother anymore. You said you would protect me." Enchanting's brother had died to save Ling Tianhao. Before he died, he asked Ling Tianhao to take care of his sister. Enchanting had been holding Ling Tianhao's weakness against him. At this moment, Ling Tianhao did not even look at her. Of all the people you could have messed with, you had to mess with the Kosha mercenaries. The Kosha mercenaries is the #1 assassin organization in the world. Do you still want to live after provoking it? Sun Jianxiong roared at Enchanting in disappointment. He really did not like Enchanting. If old Yi, who had sacrificed himself to save Ling Tianhao, was not Enchanting's brother, Ling Tianhao and Sun Jianxiong would not even look at Enchanting. The #1 assassin organization. The Kosha mercenaries was actually an assassin organization. Hearing the words assassin organization, Enchanting's entire body was paralyzed. Who could tell her that these assassins and organizations that she had only seen in movies actually existed? More importantly, she had actually provoked this power. On the other side, Bear Might heard Yunjian's words, but he didn't move. He looked at Yunjian and no longer looked at her with hostility. Instead, he asked in a probing tone, "May I know your code name in the organization?" In the Kosha mercenaries, there had always been an unwritten rule. A person's code name represented that person. At the same time, the higher the ranking, the higher the position in the Kosha mercenaries. The meaning behind Bear Might's question was obvious. If Yunjian's status was higher than his, then he would definitely be respectful to Yunjian. However, if Yunjian's position in the Kosha mercenaries was lower than his, then Bear Might would not listen to Yunjian. Just as Bo Zhan and the rest were slowly accepting Yunjian's identity, the frivolous conversation between Yunjian and Bear Might was heard again. "You don't deserve to know." Yunjian looked at Xiong Wei and crossed her arms. Indeed, he didn't deserve to know. Yunjian was the boss of the Kosha mercenaries. Even the super elites in the top 20 to 50 were not qualified to meet her. Moreover, Bear Might was just a small fry in the top 100. F***ck, this little girl is so arrogant. Bro, you probably weren't even born when we joined the Kosha mercenaries. A man standing beside Bear Might could no longer hold it in and was about to punch Yunjian. However, he was stopped by Bear Might. Bear Might was quite observant. After all, being in the top 100 was already considered impressive. Yunjian admired Bear Might's ability to hold it in. She pursed her red lips and smiled at Bear Might and his group. Then, her gaze fell on Bear Might. You're Lizard's subordinate, right? Snake. Lizard's position in the Kosha mercenaries was obvious. Yunjian actually called her Lizard. Could it be that this little girl's status was higher than Snake? Lizards. Then she was. Chapter 216. Yunjian saw Xiong Wei's expression change. She stopped smiling and looked at Xiong Wei. You don't have to guess my identity. You just need to tell me whether you work for Lizard or not. Being exposed, Bear Might stopped hesitating and nodded respectfully. That's right. I'm Lord Snake. Lizard's subordinate. Although Xiong Wei worked for Snake Lizard, he was only one of Snake Lizard's subordinates. He rarely interacted with Snake Lizard. Naturally, He was not as important as the raccoon who gave Yunjian a sports car. Okay. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and nodded. I'm done. You can continue what you were doing. Yunjian told Bear. Might as she stepped aside to reveal Yunting, who was trembling in fear in the corner. She was reminding Xiongwei not to forget to kill Yunting, who dared to slander kosher mercenaries. Okay. Xiongwei and the others had already submitted to Yunjian. Xiongwei pulled the trigger of the Browning and pointed the gun at Yunting. Ah! Yunting covered her eyes and kept saying, "Don't kill me, don't kill me, I'm wrong, no, wait." Ling Tianhao could not bear to see the sister of his comrade die in front of him. This was his promise to his comrade. Ling Tianhao was a smart man. After watching what happened, he knew that the decision of whether Yunting could live or not was in the hands of Yunjian, who they had underestimated from the beginning. Ling Tianhao looked at Yunjian and begged, "Sister Yunjian, can you let her go for my sake?" Ling Tianhao was told by Yunting's brother to take care of her. He did not want to break his promise. Otherwise, even if Yunting died in front of him 1,000 times, he would not even blink. Oh. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and raised her eyebrows at Ling Tianhao. After knowing the relationship between Ling Tianhao and Yunting, it was not surprising that Ling Tianhao would beg him to spare Yunting. Xiongwei's hand that was about to pull the trigger paused when Yunjian responded to Ling Tianhao. "Why should I let her go for your sake? Who are you to me?" Yunjian's next words made Ling Tianhao and the others' eyelids twitch. The kosher mercenaries had never let anyone go for the sake of a certain someone. But that's fine. It's troublesome to dispose of the corpse after killing someone here, Yunjian muttered to herself. Then, she looked at Bear Might and said to him, "Do as you see fit. Let her live." However, for someone who slandered the kosher mercenaries, she can be spared from death, but she must be punished. Yunjian's command actually made Xiongwei want to obey absolutely. He nodded and answered, "Yes. Let's continue." Yunjian narrowed her eyes again and smiled like an ordinary girl, bright and youthful. However, when the others thought of how she did not care about Yunting's life, they felt their hair stand on end. How did Bear Might deal with Yunting? He dislocated Yunting's arms and legs on the spot. Yunting cried out in pain and then fainted, but no one cared about her. At least she kept her life. That was already very lucky. There's no road ahead. We've been searching here for a long time. After Bear Might finished dealing with Yunting, he walked over to Yunjian and said respectfully. He thought he could guess Yunjian's identity. Apart from that person, who else could have such a kingly aura? Chapter 217. There's no road ahead. Yunjian pursed her lips. She looked around and smirked. She had already realized that they were surrounded by mud walls and there was no way out. It was a dead end. Even the exit above has been sealed, Bear Might explained once again. As he spoke, Bear Might explained in more detail, only when someone from the outside comes in will the exit be opened. However, it will quickly merge back together. Otherwise, we will be trapped here until we die. If Yunting had not fainted at this time, she would have been scared to the point of screaming after hearing this. But she probably did not even have the strength to stand up now. Since there's no way out, we'll blow one up. Yunjian smirked. She turned her head and looked at Bear Might's bulging backpack. Is there a bomb? Bo Zhan and the rest were dumbfounded when Yunjian asked Bear Might such a strange question. They were here to rob a tomb. Who would bring a bomb to rob a tomb? But they did not know the members of the kosher mercenaries. Any member of the Kosha mercenaries would carry a huge backpack when they were out on a mission or venturing into a dangerous place. There must be a bomb in the backpack. But the bomb's power was moderate. It wasn't the kind of dangerous bomb that would kill everyone around it if it was thrown. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Bear Might took out a mini-bomb from his backpack and handed it to Yunjian. There is. Everyone was stunned. The Kosha mercenaries carried bombs with them at all times. What are you going to do with the bomb? Bo Zhan stood beside Yunjian and asked her. Bo Zhan's question was on point. They were looking for a trap in the tomb. Why would they take out a bomb for no reason? Did they want to blow this place up so that no one would be able to leave alive? There's wind on the other side. That means there's a passage behind this mud wall. But this mud wall is blocking our way. Yunjian pointed at a spot and explained. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why didn't they hear the wind on the other side? That's strange. If that's the case, there must be a trap here, right? Isn't it bad to blow up the meeting like this? Sun Jianxiong asked suspiciously. As he spoke, he continued to analyze. Moreover, there should have been quite a number of people who found the mechanism and went to the other side of the mud wall before us. So why should we just blow it up? Because I'm too lazy to wait for you guys to slowly find the mechanism. Besides, I have a bomb. Wouldn't it be more convenient to just blow it up? Yunjian raised her eyebrows at Sun Jianxiong. She snapped her fingers and swung the bomb in her hand leisurely. She couldn't wait to find him. This explanation left everyone speechless. At this time, Yunjian warned, "You guys stay away." After everyone had retreated a distance away, Yunjian ignited the bomb and threw it at the mud wall. She didn't look the least bit flustered as she lay on the ground. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The dust and dirt that flew up from the explosion hit them in the face. After the dust and dirt settled on the ground, everyone shone their flashlights at the small hole that was blasted open by the explosion. In front of the small hole, on the other side of the mud wall, was a passageway. It's really a passage. Sun Jianxiong shouted in surprise. At the same time, he turned his head and saw that the girl seemed to have everything under control. He couldn't help but gulp. Chapter 218. Let's go. Yunjian stood up and patted her dusty clothes. She took the lead and walked towards the small hole that was blown up. When the others saw this, they all followed suit. Yi Yunting had fainted. Ling Tianhao had no choice but to stay even though he did not want to care about her. At this moment, other than the two of them, the others continued to move forward. There was no way back. The only thing left for them was to move forward. Tap, tap, tap. The surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of footsteps could be heard, and the endless darkness that could be seen when one looked up. Splash, 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 there seemed to be the sound of flowing water in the distance. There's the sound of flowing water over there. Everyone moved forward quickly in surprise. There's also human voices. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She took the lead and suddenly said this. Everyone was stunned out of habit. No one heard human voices, except for Yunjian. However, after the incident where Yunjian directly blew up the tunnel, everyone had tacitly chosen to believe her words. As expected, after walking for about 4 to 5 minutes, mixed human voices came from the other end of the tunnel. Yunjian and the others could feel it as well. The passage was gradually widening again. Until finally, a mud hole the size of a basketball court appeared in front of everyone's eyes. On this empty land, groups of people and horses were all gathered together. Some even set up tents on this open space. Soon, everyone realized that these people were the ones who entered the tomb and did not come out again. Beside this huge mud hole, there was a stream of water that came from nowhere. It flowed out from the first corner and then flowed out from the last corner. The most amazing thing was that this stream of water, which came from an unknown source, was filled with lively little fish and shrimps. There were quite a lot of them. This was the world of the underground people. Not to mention Bojan and the others, even Yun Jian could not help but smile. At this moment, Sun Jinxiong and the others seemed to have seen someone they knew in the crowd. Professor Su. Sun Jinxiong and the others rushed forward. You guys are here too. The man called Dr. Su was full of energy. He was about 50 or 60 years old and was a very energetic old man. Professor Su was also stunned when he saw Sun Jinxiong and the others. It was obvious that Sun Jinxiong and the others had been sent to the tomb by Z country to look for Professor Su, who had also been buried. It could be seen that Professor Su held a high position in Z country and was highly valued. Professor Su, what's going on here? Why didn't anyone come out of the tomb? Sun Jinxiong asked. Yun Jian and the others stood in the distance and listened. Professor Su pointed at a stone door carved with dragons and phoenixes. He sighed and said, "It's not that we can't go back, it's that no one wants to." When everyone heard this, they were instantly stunned. Professor Su explained the whole story in detail. After the first person to enter the tomb discovered this place, he refused to leave. There was one reason. There were a few ancient characters engraved on the stone door with the dragon and phoenix carvings. The experts and scholars studied it for several days and finally deciphered the translation of the ancient characters. The translated meaning of the words on the stone door was, "Pass through this stone door and you will know all the secrets of the sandalwood box." Of course, those who wanted to pass through this stone door had to stay here for a whole year. Everyone present was here to decipher the secrets of the sandalwood box. Of course, they refused to leave. Moreover, there were large numbers of fish and prawns in the flowing water. Once they stayed here, they could catch fish and prawns and cook them. They did not have to worry about starving to death. In the eyes of outsiders, the people who entered the tomb had already become horrifying skeletons. Professor Su, since you're here, why don't you contact the outside world? Sun Jinxiong asked the key question. Professor Su shook his head and smiled. There's no signal here. After he said that, everyone took out their communicators and looked. There was no signal. Yun Jian came over while everyone was still in shock. She looked at Professor Su and asked, "May I ask if you've seen a handsome man who's about 19 years old and is 185 meters tall? There are 2 people with him." She was naturally asking about CE. She looked around but still could not find him. She could not help but worry. Chapter 219. Sun Jinxiong, Bojan, and the rest were stunned by Professor Su's words. Sun Jinxiong, in particular, was the first to realize that something was amiss, so he continued questioning Professor Su. "That's not right, Professor Su. You said that one has to stay here for a year to pass through the stone door. But even if this tomb was excavated first, the person who entered the tomb had only stayed here for a few months at most, right? What I mean is, how could that young man have already entered the stone door?" Sun Jinxiong asked out of curiosity. After all of them, including Yun Jian, had just made their way here. It could be said that they knew nothing about the recent happenings in the tomb. "Let me finish first." Professor Su gulped. He immediately became spirited, looking at the group with a solemn gaze, and continued, "You can pass through the stone door by staying here for a year. That's only one option. So, there's another option." This time, Yun Jian asked. Professor Su then looked at Yunjian and nodded. That's right. As he spoke, Professor Su frowned and pointed at an open stone cave beside the stone door. This stone cave is another way to pass through other than the stone door, Professor Su said. Bo Zhan and Fu Axian were both expert grave robbers, so they were well versed in mechanisms. Fu Axian was the first to notice that the stone cave was unusual. Fu Axian shouted in shock, "That stone cave has a monstrous mechanism in it." As he spoke, he ran over to check out the cave entrance, then returned to the group. Let alone a person, even a fly would find it difficult to pass through this cave. Fu Axian was deeply shocked when he said this. That's right. Professor Su nodded. No one believed it at first and insisted on passing through this stone cave first, saying that they didn't want to wait a year for the stone door to open. Professor Su continued, his expression turning solemn. In the end, without exception, all of them died tragically in this cave. Their flesh was mangled, their bodies pierced by thousands of arrows. When the group heard this, they could not help but shudder. He passed, Yunjian said after listening to Professor Su from the side. It was not a question, but a confirmation. He must have passed. Yes. Only that young man and his two subordinates passed through the cave. When Professor Su said this, his entire body was filled with an unprecedented excitement. None of the people gathered here were ordinary people, and there were many assassins and secret agents. However, those who insisted on entering the cave and didn't want to wait a year for the stone door to open all died tragically in the cave. CE was the only one who passed. On the other hand, the mechanisms in this cave were set up one after another. It had to be said that the tomb builder was very powerful. The mechanism he built would only activate when a creature wanted to pass through. Furthermore, it could be used repeatedly. In other words, even if the mechanism was used once, it could still be used hundreds or thousands of times. Yunjian's lips curled up even more. She gently pursed her lips and her smile became even more unbridled. You guys stay here, I'll go look for him. Yunjian looked straight at the people in front of her. Her casual words caused everyone present to be dumbfounded. What? Yunjian, you want to go through that cave? Sun Jinxiong cried out involuntarily. This isn't a joke. Bo Zhan followed up. Professor Su, on the other hand, looked at Yunjian fiercely. She was only 15 or 16 years old, right? Did she really have the ability to go through that cave? It should be known that those who had tried to pass through the hole but had failed and died tragically were all internationally renowned figures. There was even one person who was ranked 6th on the international secret agent list. Even that person did not pass through that cave. Chapter 220. Little girl, you want to go through that cave too? Don't you know how many people have died in that cave? Only the last batch of people who didn't want to take the risk stayed behind and stayed here, waiting for the stone door to open. Professor Su took a deep breath. Then, Professor Su used the tone of an elder reprimanding a junior and continued to lecture Yunjian, this is not a child's play. Only that young man and his two subordinates have succeeded in breaking through this cave. Life is precious. How can you waste your hard-earned life like this? Professor Su was sure that Yunjian would not be able to pass through the mechanism in this cave. If she forced her way through, she would end up with 1,000 arrows piercing through her heart. After all, Yunjian was so young that he could not convince himself even if he wanted to. What's more, he was a scientific researcher. To believe that a little girl like Yunjian who had not even reached puberty would be able to break through that cave, that was a fool's dream. Although Professor Su was doing this for Yunjian's sake, he did not want to see anyone make unnecessary sacrifices. But when the words came out of his mouth, his tone became not so pleasing. That's right, Yunjian. Don't do something so risky. Professor Su must have his reasons. Sun Jianxiong helped Professor Su to persuade Yunjian. Bo Zhan and Fu Axian did not believe that Yunjian could pass through this cave. But the two of them did not say anything. As for Bear Might and the others, they simply remained silent. Bear Might was silent because he had already guessed Yunjian's shocking identity. If Yunjian was really one of the Kosha mercenaries, how could a mere cave trap her? If she wanted to pass through that cave, it would be as easy as lifting a finger. Do you think I would joke around with my life? Yunjian sneered. She continued, I'm just letting you know, I'm not asking for your permission. She, Yunjian, had never sought permission from others before. Yunjian's arrogant words made everyone present stop talking. Our Professor Su is doing this for your own good. How can a little girl like you be so ungrateful? At this moment, a woman standing behind Dr. Su yelled at Yunjian to defend Dr. Su. The woman's name was Jiang Zhaoxue. Jiang Zhaoxue was Professor Su's assistant. It was normal for a renowned scholar like Professor Su to have a few assistants around him. Jiang Zhaoxue was proud of being able to work under Professor Su, so she was arrogant and domineering. When she saw Yunjian refuting Professor Su, who she respected, she couldn't help but retaliate. Yunjian merely curled her lips slightly and ignored Jiang Zhaoxue. She merely glanced at Xiongwei and the others and said, all of you stay here. As she spoke, she walked towards the cave. You can't go. You can't go. Seeing that Yunjian didn't listen to his advice and hated her for not listening to him, Professor Su was even more annoyed. However, Bo Zhan noticed that Xiongwei and the others who belonged to the Kosha mercenaries along with Yunjian were not panicking at all. Bo Zhan was observant and he couldn't help but look at the girl who was walking towards the cave. He saw that Yunjian had arrived in front of the cave. She lifted her leg and jumped into the cave while Bo Zhan, Professor Su, and everyone else who was waiting for the stone door to open gasped in shock and fear. Swoosh swoosh swoosh, as expected, after Yunjian entered the cave's mechanism was activated. Countless flying arrows rained down and were aimed at Yunjian. Just when everyone was imagining Yunjian's tragic ending, Bo Zhan flipped over. With a few somersaults and agile steps, Yunjian leaped across the cave where countless experts had died. She turned a corner and vanished from the spot swiftly. She. Professor Su's mouth was agape in shock and he couldn't catch his breath. Chapter 221. Such skills, no wonder she's the number one in the Kosha mercenaries. Even Bear Might could not help but praise Yunjian's agility. As he spoke, Bear Might could not help but admire and respect Yunjian. What did you say? She's from the Kosha mercenaries? Professor Su, who was standing aside, heard Bear Might's exclamation and could not help but shout. Bo Zhan, on the other hand, heard another word in Bear Might's words. Number 1. Yunjian is the number 1 in the Kosha mercenaries? Bo Zhan asked Bear Might, dumbfounded. Ha! Who would have thought that Xiongwei would just snort at these people who had turned pale with fright, ignoring them? Bear Might thought to himself that if these people knew Yunjian's true identity, they would faint from fright. Even so, it was enough to shock Bo Zhan, Professor Su, and the rest. Even if Professor Su was not involved in these matters, he had heard of the prestige of the Kosha mercenaries. There were only a few people who could be called the number 1 in the Kosha mercenaries, and each of them definitely had a place in the international rankings. It was no wonder that Yunjian would act the way she did earlier. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. Jiang Jiaoxue, on the other hand, clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. From Professor Su and the rest's shock, she could tell that the little girl who spoke rudely just now was actually a big shot. No, she could not accept it. But in the end, Jiang Jiaoxue could only swallow her anger. On the other hand, Yun Jian passed the first checkpoint of the cave effortlessly and switched on the only lighter she had to light up the path ahead before she continued to move forward alone. Compared to when she was just reborn, her skills and agility had improved by leaps and bounds. Of course, this was also due to the results of her recent training in the military training camp. Tap, tap, tap. Stepping on the water that flowed out of nowhere, Yun Jian kept moving forward. But the strange thing was that after she passed through the small mechanism at the entrance of the cave, nothing dangerous happened. Even so, Yun Jian did not forget to maintain her initial vigilance. No one could predict what would appear in the next second or what they would encounter in this pitch-black tunnel. Yun Jian walked for about 15 minutes when she heard the sound of rushing water. She quickened her pace. After turning a corner, a bright light flashed in front of her eyes. Bright light? Yun Jian frowned suspiciously. When she saw the scenery in front of her again, she had reached the end of the cave tunnel. The end of the cave was actually a world of its own. And if she guessed correctly, she had already left the tomb. Because when they walked out from the end of the tunnel, the scorching sun was right above their heads. The exit. Out? Could it be that the so-called secret of the sandalwood and the people waiting bitterly for the stone door to open were just waiting for a secret that did not exist? Just as Yun Jian was thinking this, a tall and handsome figure suddenly rushed past her. Just as Yun Jian was about to retaliate, a familiar scent wafted into her nose. The next second, she was pulled into the other party's embrace. Why are you here? Ce frowned and pulled Yun Jian under his protection. Yun Jian felt a wave of dizziness, but she did not push Ce away. She did not feel that there was anything wrong with this. Instead, she leaned her head against Ce's chest. You lost contact, so I came to look for you. She whispered. Did Shuang tell you privately? Ce's clear voice came from above Yun Jian. There was a trace of anger in his voice, as well as a trace of joy that even he himself did not notice. Chapter 222. Yun Jian buried her head in Ce's chest. She then added, I wanted to look for you myself. A smile appeared on Ce's handsome face. He looked down at Yun Jian and reached out to stroke Yun Jian's head. Thank goodness you're all right. He had managed to get past the traps in the cave even though it was a piece of cake for him. However, he would still be worried for Yun Jian even if she was confident that she would be able to get past such a dangerous trap. Yun Jian's cheeks flushed instantly when he stroked her head for no reason. She did not know why she did not push Ce away at that moment. Ce's pleasant scent wafted into her nose. Ahem, an untimely cough interrupted Yun Jian and Ce's embrace. Yun Jian quickly wriggled out of Ce's embrace, her heart thumping wildly. This was the first time she had been caught hugging a man in a messy position. Slain God, the king of international secret agents and the world's #1, was blushing because of this. Young master, we have a new discovery. Adam, who had just interrupted the intimacy between the two of them, touched the bridge of his nose, his handsome face carrying a hint of teasing. Their young master was really interested in this woman. Would this woman become the young madam of their young master? Ce's lips curled slightly. He flashed a satisfied smile at an angle that Yun Jian could not see. Let's go. Ce held Yun Jian's hand. Feeling the warmth of his large palm, Yun Jian did not reject him nor was she shy. She regained her senses and asked him seriously, "Where are we? How did we get out of the cave? Could it be that the secret of the sandalwood box is not in this ancient tomb? Could it be that the people below had been waiting and anticipating for nothing?" Ce frowned. He looked down at Yunjian and said without holding back, "I suspect that we've entered another world." "Another world?" Yunjian asked in surprise. "That's why I got Adam and Immerse to investigate just now," Ce said with a mesmerizing smile on his face. His handsome face twitched slightly. He continued, "Now, we have a new discovery." His patient explanation made Adam, who was leading the team, pause. Since when did young master have such a gentle and patient side? Adam was stunned. He led Yunjian and Ce through the forest and finally arrived in front of a huge rock. There were a few lines of ancient words carved on the rock. Immerse was standing next to the rock. Immerse was looking at the words on the rock. Seeing Adam leading Ce and Yunjian over, Immerse called out to Ce, "Young master." Ce nodded and looked at Immerse pointing to the rock in front of them. He said to him and Yunjian, "The words on this rock do not belong to any country or dynasty. I can't translate its meaning." Immerse frowned bitterly as he spoke. Ce couldn't help but take a second look at the words that even Immerse couldn't translate. "This is..." Yunjian suddenly stretched out her hand. She took 2 steps forward and placed her hand in the middle of the words on the rock under Ce's suspicious and Adam and Immerse's surprised gazes. The sandalwood box is an ancient divine artifact of the Yulong continent. The person who owns it must have supreme divine power and the ability to bring the dead back to life. Yunjian looked at the words on the rock and read them out loud. After she finished speaking, even she was stunned. Ce, Adam and Immerse were even more surprised. Chapter 223. Yunjian didn't know how she could understand the words engraved on the rock. It was just that when she first saw them, she suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu. Then, she read them out based on her feelings. Ce turned to look at Yunjian. Seeing that her eyebrows were tightly knitted together, he reached out his slender fingers and smoothed them out for her. There was a gentle light in his eyes. Beside him, Immerse looked at Yunjian solemnly and asked, "You can understand these words?" Yunjian shifted her gaze away from Ce. She shook her head and nodded at Immerse. "It feels like déjà vu. When I saw these words, I translated them out of habit." "Yulong mainland," Ce murmured softly with a raised brow looking at the bold words on the rock. "Then this world is the Yulong continent you mentioned," Ce said in a firm tone. The reason why Ce was so sure that this place wasn't the world they originally lived in was because the flowers, grass, water, and wood of this world were different from the original world. This was Ce's feeling as well, so he told him directly. This was definitely not the place they originally lived in. It was the same as Yunjian's intuition that the words on the rock were translated. Ce even felt that this world made him feel as if he originally belonged here. "Young master, the sandalwood box has been set up. We can go now." Adam, who had been sent out to set up the sandalwood box, came back and said to Ce. Ce nodded slightly. "Let's go." Ce held Yunjian's small hand and walked back the way they came. The sandalwood box originally belonged here. He was just returning it to its rightful owner. As for where this place was, it was no longer within their scope of consideration. Yunjian followed Ce's tall figure as they walked back step by step. She glanced at him from time to time, feeling warm in her heart. However, no one knew that their conflict with the Yulong continent was far from over. Of course, this was a story for later. Somewhere in the Yulong mainland, a 10-meter tall crystal ball stood in the middle of a large hole. Crack, Suddenly, there was a loud noise, and a huge crack appeared on the tall crystal ball. In the next second, the entire crystal ball miraculously collapsed. I'm back. The sorcerer god had reappeared. The sorcerer tribe has been waiting for thousands of years. Sorcerer god, you're finally back. In the center of the hall, a young girl around 16 or 17 years old shouted excitedly. She was dressed in black clothes. She had waited for thousands of years in the sorcerer tribe. It had been thousands of years since the sorcerer god had fallen. When the sorcerer god had fallen, she had promised that she would return in 1,000 years. The breaking of the crystal ball signified the return of the sorcerer god. Yunjian and Ce had easily exited the cave's mechanism and returned to where Professor Su, Bojan and the rest were. As soon as they saw Yunjian and the other three coming out of the cave, everyone crowded around them. Everyone wanted to know what secrets were hidden behind the stone door. Miss Yun, did you find anything inside? Professor Su was the first to rush up and ask. Even the way he addressed her had changed from a little girl to Miss Yun. You guys can go take a look for yourselves. Yunjian's lips curved into a half-smile. Her answer elicited more dissatisfaction from the group. Everyone knew that they did not have the ability to break through the cave, so they came to ask her. Jiang Zhaoxue had been tolerating Yunjian for a long time. Seeing this, she could not help but be the first to shout. It's because we can't pass through the cave that we're asking you. How can you be like this? So what if you tell us what you saw inside? It won't hurt you at all, right? Little girl, you're quite capable, but it's not right to be so arrogant. Jiang Zhaoxue dared to speak to Yunjian this way because she had caught a glimpse of Ce not far away. Yunjian was not the only one who had entered the cave. Why was she so arrogant? Therefore, Jiang Zhaoxue was certain that a handsome person like Ce would definitely tell her what had happened inside. She turned around and asked Ce, "Hey, handsome, I saw that you've been in the cave too. Can you tell us what happened inside?" Chapter 224. Jiang Zhaoxue was very pretty. Although she wasn't as pretty as Yunjian, she had a pair of long, fair legs that men loved. She was almost 1.7 meters tall and stood out from the crowd. Coupled with her good looks, she was the campus belle of the school even when she was still in school. In addition, Jiang Zhaoxue had excellent grades since she was a student, so she became Professor Su's assistant at a young age. This was something that Jiang Zhaoxue was proud of. One had to admit that Jiang Zhaoxue was a woman that men would fall in love with. Not only did she have a good figure and good looks, but she also had excellent grades. Jiang Zhaoxue also admitted that there weren't many men who could be seduced by her. She saw that Ce was so handsome and had shown good skills, so she took the opportunity to seduce him. At the same time, she wanted to ask about everything that Ce, Yunjian, and the others had seen after entering the cave. That was why Jiang Zhaoxue threw Ce a seductive glance. She even felt that it was advisable to sacrifice her beauty when necessary. After all, no ordinary man could resist her charm. Unfortunately, Ce wasn't an ordinary man. Get lost. Jiang Zhaoxue was feeling smug and thought that Ce would answer her. Then, she would sneer at Yunjian and provoke Ce. Suddenly, Ce spat out a word, instantly shattering all of Jiang Zhaoxue's fantasies. This one word was shouted in front of everyone. It was obvious that Ce didn't take Jiang Zhaoxue seriously at all. Ha! Yunjian crossed her arms and watched. She already knew that this would be the result. Jiang Zhaoxue was stunned by Ce's shout. She didn't react for a long time. Unfortunately, Jiang Zhaoxue wasn't an ordinary woman. Her skin was so thick that even bullets couldn't pierce it. When she came back to her senses, she moved closer to Ce again. This time, she even wanted to move her body towards Ce. Handsome, don't be so fierce. We're all on the same side. If you're so fierce, I'll be scared. As she spoke, Jiang Jiaoxue wanted to take a big step forward and press her whole body against Ce. She felt that Ce had just shouted at her in front of so many people, making her lose face. She didn't believe that there was a man who couldn't be subdued by a woman. Despite Jiang Jiaoxue's appearance, she was a famous social butterfly in the upper class. What kind of man would not be obedient in her hands? In spite of it, before Jiang Jiaoxue could take 2 steps closer to Ce, she was shocked by Adam who stood beside him. Jiang Jiaoxue wasn't the only one who was shocked. Everyone present was shocked as well. Adam took out a desert eagle from his waist and pointed it at Jiang Jiaoxue, who was about to step forward. He threatened, "If you dare to take another step closer to our young master, I'll blow your head off." Then, Adam fired a shot at Jiang Jiaoxue's position. The gun whizzed towards Jiang Jiaoxue. Amidst Jiang Jiaoxue's threatening screams, the gun flew past her side and finally hit the mud wall. He really did shoot. Jiang Jiaoxue was so scared that her face turned pale. If even Ce's subordinates dared to do this, she was sure that if she were to do something again in the next second, the bullet would go through her head instead. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but tremble. Ce held Yunjian's hand again under everyone's gaze. He didn't say a word and walked out without looking back. Chapter 225. Seeing that Yunjian, Ce, and the rest had left the stone door, some of the people who had been waiting for a long time felt that it was impossible. There might really be no treasure behind the stone door. If there was really a treasure or the secret of the sandalwood box, then how could Yunjian and Ce come out of the stone cave so quickly? Hence, a portion of the people left with Yunjian and Ce. As the saying goes, 1 spreads to 10, and 10 spreads to 100. In the end, there were only a few people left waiting for the stone door to open. In fact, they could be counted with one hand. If they knew that there was another world behind the stone door and that the sandalwood box was there, they would have raced their brains to get in. It was a pity that they did not know about these things. Moreover, when Yunjian and the rest walked out, it was as if there was really nothing behind the stone door. Hence, the group felt that it was futile to wait any longer, so they left one by one. When they reached the stairs, it was the first trap they encountered when they went down the dry well. Since the mechanical puppet would automatically shut down once it walked in, and the activation mechanism was outside, the group of people were at a loss as to what to do. "How are we going to get out?" a young man who had lived here for a long time asked. "Yunjian, did you see any traps?" Bo Zhan saw the situation and moved to stand beside Yunjian. "No," Yunjian replied faintly. Then, she added, "But, I have a way to get out." Once they heard that Yunjian had a way out, the group gathered around her. Yunjian was now different in their hearts. She was someone who had the ability to break through the stone cave full of arrows. Even though Yunjian looked very young, what she had done earlier was enough to convince everyone. "What is it?" Bo Zhan asked immediately, his eyes filled with anticipation. From the beginning, Yunjian's performance was different from the rest. Bo Zhan was an expert grave robber himself, but he had never seen someone like Yunjian who could see through the traps with just one look. Hence, he placed his hopes on Yunjian. "It's simple." Yunjian's lips curled slightly, and she said in the next second, "If we can't get out, then we'll blow it up." Yunjian's words caused an uproar among the crowd. Bo Zhan, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth. He recalled the scene of Yunjian blowing up the mud wall, and his heart twitched uncontrollably. Wasn't it too casual for the Kosha mercenaries to carry bombs around and set them off at any time? When Yunjian took out the last bullet she had looted from Bear. Might, however, those who had never seen a bomb before were stunned. F***ck, he even brought a bomb into the tomb. That's amazing. Someone said with deep emotion. Boom. Just as that person exclaimed, Yunjian had already blown open the door of the confinement mechanism and walked out with CE. Although the dry well was very high, it was a piece of cake for Yunjian, CE, Adam and Mo-sen who had been training all year round. Hence, they quickly climbed out. Outside the dry well. Yu Bufan had been hesitating outside the dry well ever since his two good friends, Bo Zhan and Fu Axayan, brought Yunjian and the rest into the tomb. He was very worried that his two friends would never return after entering the tomb. Even the communicator in his hand showed that there was no signal on their side. He paced back and forth anxiously and helplessly. Bufan, don't you know the truth of that rumor? These people are going into the tomb one by one, aren't they just sending themselves to their deaths? How long has it been? Look at the people who went into the tomb, are there still people coming out? Even if there are still people alive, they must have starved to the point that only a pile of bones is left. Someone stood in front of Yu Bufan and advised him. This person suddenly saw Yu Bufan looking at the dry well in shock. He followed Yu Bufan's gaze suspiciously and saw Yunjian and Ce jumping out of the dry well one after another. Chapter 226. Yu Bufan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw Yunjian jumping out of the dry well so easily. You actually, how did you? The person who had been persuading Yu Bufan earlier was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. How could someone who had entered this tomb come back alive? This was different from what the rumors said. Just as this person finished speaking, Adam and Mawson jumped out of the dry well one after another with a plop sound. Both of them were skilled as they stood behind Ce without making a sound after exiting the well. You guys actually came out alive. This is a tomb. The person who had been persuading Yu Bufan earlier pointed at Yunjian and the rest with a trembling finger. One had to know that the first person to excavate this tomb had already been down for half a year and there were many people who had continued to enter the tomb. But this tomb was like a black hole that no one could return from. No one who had gone down had ever come back up. In the end, all the rumors that this tomb was haunted or evil had spread. This made those who wanted to enter the tomb shrink back. Who didn't cherish their own lives? But what did he see today? Someone had climbed out of the dry well alive. This was simply a world-class miracle. Why? We can't live. Yunjian raised her eyebrows and smiled at the person, looking relaxed and refreshed. When she knew that Ce had met with an accident, she was really shocked. But now that Ce was fine, her heart was at ease. Yunjian, have you seen Bo Zhan and Fu Axayan? Yu Bufan walked towards Yunjian with a frown. He was naturally worried about his two good friends. Now that he saw Yunjian and the rest come out, he couldn't help but ask her with a sigh of relief. Aren't they climbing? Yunjian turned sideways to let Yu Bufan have a clear view of the dry well. They saw a pair of hands suddenly climbing and grabbing onto the rim of the dry well, then kicking hard. Everyone saw a person suddenly appear in front of them. At this moment, he was struggling to climb out of the well. Once Bo Zhan climbed out of the well, he waved his hand to wipe off his cold sweat. He turned to look at Yunjian and sighed. Why is this well so high? I can see how easy it was for all of you to get out. If I knew that climbing would be so tiring, I should have asked you to ask Bufan to throw a rope down to save us. When Yu Bufan and the other man heard this, they noticed a word. When Bo Zhan said, "we," did that mean that there were quite a number of people still alive? both of them turned pale with fright. In the end, with Beau Jean's help, they found a group of people to rescue everyone from the dry well. In the end, when Beau Jean and the rest were brought up, Beau Jean merely described Yunjian's capabilities. In the end, when Beau Jean went to look for Yunjian to explain to everyone, Yunjian and Ce were long gone. At the same time, Bear Mite's group was also present. Yunjian had already robbed Bear Mite and his men's off-road vehicle and was rushing back to Country Z's airport with Ce and the rest. Bear Mite and his men who were robbed were on the brink of tears, but once they thought of Yunjian's identity, they could only accept the fact that they were robbed by her. At the airport, Adam and Mo Sen were sent to work by Ce. Ce, on the other hand, boarded the plane back to Country Z's Longmen City with Yunjian. What they did not know was that what happened in the catacomb in the coming days would make international headlines. Chapter 227. Since they had prepared an excuse beforehand, neither Qin Yiru nor the school found it odd when Yunjian disappeared for the past few days. After Yunjian had settled down, she received news from Zhang Jifan. The renovation of the shop was done. What was lacking now was a channel to import cars. Yunjian had already contacted the channel to import cars. Once the shop was done, she sent a luring witch to contact the relevant personnel. Furthermore, Zhang Jifan was the one who contacted all the relevant personnel. Since it was a car dealership, the sales volume of cars was not high in 1998. By the standards of some families in this era, cars were considered a high consumable. Not only did the purchase of a car require a constant supply of fuel, the car itself was not cheap. In addition, there was the need to pay taxes and a series of related matters. Buying a car like this was not an easy task. Therefore, she was planning to sell it to the rich and powerful bosses at the moment. Yunjian's new cruise had just been established and its reputation in Longmen City was not established yet. Some of the bosses had not even heard of New Cruise's name, let alone come here to look at and buy cars. Under such circumstances, Yunjian planned to hold a large-scale auto show in Longmen City. As the name suggested, an auto show was to showcase cars to the public while inviting reputable figures to watch the show to increase the company's reputation. Of course, there were monetary conditions to hold an auto show. Yunjian did not have to worry about that. As for inviting reputable figures to watch the show, Yunjian already had plans for that. As for the auto show, Yunjian had moved it to a month later. Within this month, she had asked Zhang Jifan to arrange the car and get them to stay in it. At the same time, she had him prepare everything related to the auto show. As for other matters such as inviting reputable figures to the auto show, she would take care of them. Zhang Jifan was now obedient to Yunjian in every way, so he nodded in agreement to Yunjian's arrangements. When Yunjian came home today, she realized that Qin Yiru was home early. Qin Yiru was smiling as she made dinner for Yunjian and sat down with her. "Mom, what's wrong?" Yunjian asked, curious. Qin Yiru was always the last to come home. Although Qin Yiru's job as a hotel attendant was quite relaxing, she came home late. Today, Qin Yiru came home early, so Yunjian found it odd. "Xiao Jian, I found a better job. It's easy too, there's less work but the pay is high. It's 1,500 yuan a month." Back then, Qin Yiru's monthly income was only a few hundred yuan a month. She was over the moon. Seeing how happy Qin Yiru was, Yunjian was happy as well. Yunjian asked Qin Yiru, "Mom, what's the job?" I'm just a cleaner who cleans the floor but the pay is high. It's not tiring, I just have to clean the entire place in the morning, afternoon, and night. Qin Yiru answered cheerfully. She then continued, the place I'm working at is the newly established New Cruise in our city. It's a company that sells cars. The boss is doing really well with his business. I heard that he spent more than 10 million yuan to buy this shop. Chapter 228. When she heard from Qin Yiru that her mother was working at New Cruise, Yun Jian's eyelids twitched. Her mother's workplace had become her own company. Yun Jian was taken aback by this as well. It was a good thing though. At least Qin Yiru was working at her company. It would be convenient for her to give Qin Yiru subsidies in the future. It was legitimate. At the same time, Yun Jian was thinking if she should tell Zhang Jifan the next time she saw him to give the cleaning lady a raise. Xiao Jian, are you listening to me? Qin Yiru waved her hand a few times in front of Yun Jian when she saw that Yun Jian was distracted. I'm listening, Mom, Yun Jian answered with a smile at Qin Yiru with squinted eyes. Qin Yiru nodded and continued with her thoughts. Xiao Jian, I just think that we've been bothering your Auntie Dong for too long. I feel bad about it. I've saved some money these days and want to rent a place. Let's move out of here first. When I've saved enough money in the future, I'll come back and visit your Auntie Dong properly, Qin Yiru said. Yun Jian understood Qin Yiru right away. Qin Yiru thought that they had been bothering her for too long. It was someone else's house after all, so it was not appropriate. Mom, I'm fine with it. I'll listen to you, Yun Jian said. She really was fine with it. To her, moving to another place was just a change of sleeping place. Xiao Jian, you're not against it. Qin Yiru was surprised. After all, moving out of the villa meant that their living environment would be much worse than it was now. Qin Yiru was thinking that if Yun Jian did not want to move to a worse environment, she would not move out first. After some time, when he had enough money on hand, he would rent a decent place to rent before moving out. I'll leave it to you, Yun Jian said with a nod. Okay, then tomorrow morning when your Auntie Dong is here, let's talk to her about it, Qin Yiru said. Qin Yiru was really grateful to Dong Wuan. When she was at her lowest, it was her old friend who took her family in. However, now that she had money on hand, she felt that she had disturbed him for too long and should move out. That was all. After all, everyone had a family. Although they were childhood best friends, they were now married. Although Dong Ruan's husband had passed away, she felt that it was inappropriate for her to disturb them for too long. The next day, Dong Wuan rested at home. When Qin Yiru mentioned this to Dong Wuan refused at first. But later, for some reason, he was convinced. At the same time, Dong Wuan also took a few days off to find the most comfortable rental apartment for Qin Yiru. Qin Yiru wanted to look for it herself, but she could not resist her best friend's enthusiasm in the end. Soon, a rental apartment was found. Early in the morning, Qin Yiru brought Yun Jian to move out with bags of various sizes. Yun Jian did not have a lot of things. She only had a backpack and there were not many things in it. Xiao Jian, is everything ready? Qin Yiru asked Yun Jian with bags of various sizes. Dong Wuan had also taken a day off to help Qin Yiru move things. She looked at Yun Jian as well. Everything's ready, Yun Jian answered with a nod. Let's go then, Qin Yiru said and pushed the bags out the door. Screech, there was the sound of a car braking and the door was opened. Ce had just returned from the door when he saw Yun Jian and Qin Yiru walking out with bags of various sizes. He asked with a frown, what are you guys doing? Yeah, Yi's back. Auntie, I've been bothering you all these days. I'm moving out today. Come, Xiao Jian, say goodbye to Ai, Qin Yiru told Ce. She had been addressing Ce in an affectionate tone like an elder these days, and it was tacitly acknowledged. When Ce heard Qin Yiru's explanation, his brows furrowed and he was already in front of Yunjian, his tall frame looming over her. Chapter 229. Both Qin Yiru and Dong Wan were flabbergasted by Ce's inexplicable action. Yunjian, who stood in front of Ce, felt her eyelids twitch. Her heart was beating uncontrollably with a thump-thump-thump sound. Ah, yeah, Auntie and Xiao Jian have already found a place outside. We're planning to move in today. Qin Yiru's voice softened as she faced the fuming Ce. Even Qin Yiru herself did not realize it. Why did she not think that Ce's action was odd? To Qin Yiru, she was also someone who had never been involved in love. Qin Yiru had never liked Yun Jian's biological father, Yun Gang. Back then, her family was not doing well and wanted her to marry Yun Gang, so she did. Qin Yiru had never experienced the joy of love, so she found Ce's inexplicable action strange as well. Dong Wan, on the other hand, was different. She was stunned for a moment before she realized what was going on. Could her nephew have feelings for Yunjian, interested? Dong Wan knew that Ce was 19 years old and no woman had ever been able to get close to him. No woman dared to even take a few steps closer to him, let alone get close to him. Ever since Ce's mother, who was also her biological sister, passed away, Dong Wan had been protective of Ce like a mother. It was because Ce was a child without a mother since he was young, so Dong Wan had to take care of him. What Dong Wan was most worried about was Ce's marriage in the future. Her nephew was proficient in everything, and his appearance was so handsome that it was indescribable. It was just that he had never been enlightened when it came to relationships. Therefore, Dong Ruan's heart skipped a beat when she saw the scene. Dong Wan had her own selfish motives, but it was undeniable that she liked Yunjian quite a bit. Now that she saw Ce's action, Dong Wan helped Ce persuade Qin Yiru. Yiru, why are you insisting on moving out with your two children? Stay. Look, even my nephew can't bear for you guys to leave. As she spoke, Dong Wan held Qin Yiru's hand and patted it. Her voice was soft and weary as she said, Yiru, stay here. Look at me. I'm living alone in this empty villa. It's so lonely. My lover left early and I'm glad that you guys are here these few days. My son goes to school too. I used to face this lonely house after work and it was so disappointing. So, Yiru, stay here. Dong Wan said it sincerely. After Dong Ruan's husband passed away in a car accident, she had been living alone with her son. Although they were well off, her son studied in a closed-off aristocratic school and rarely returned home. Now that she saw Qin Yiru's family moving in, she was genuinely happy. As for Ce, he did not stay for long at Dong Ruan's house. When Dong Wan persuaded Qin Yiru to stay, Ce's grip on Yunjian's hand tightened. She wanted to leave but he would not let go. Yunjian pursed her lips. She wanted to say something but when the words reached her mouth, she could not say anything. Qin Yiru did not seem to notice Ce's grip on Yunjian's hand. She was slow when it came to emotions. However, under Dong Ruan's repeated persuasion, Qin Yiru finally nodded with tears in her eyes. All right, we'll stay. Yunjian's cheeks were already rosy. She struggled but could not break free. In the end, she could only give up. And Dong Wan saw all of this. Chapter 230. The moment Ce heard Qin Yiru say that they would be staying, his handsome lips curled into a charming smile without anyone noticing. She was not leaving. Then, he would be able to see her for as long as he stayed here, excluding the few days when Yunjian stayed in school. How nice. From then on, Ce would only go out to handle some necessary matters during the 5 days when Yunjian stayed in school. On the weekends when Yunjian came back from school, she would be able to see him every day. She was extremely surprised by this. Of course, this was all in the future. By the time Dong-won helped Qin Yiru move everything back to every corner of the villa, it was already 4:30 p.m. Dong-won glanced at Yunjian and Ce before saying to Qin Yiru, "Yiru, I don't have to go to work today. Since we're all here, I'll be the host tonight. Let's go to a restaurant together." Dong-won was afraid that Qin Yiru would reject her. She could not help but recall the scene back then, so she said to Qin Yiru, "Yiru, do you remember when we snuck out of school to eat wontons when we didn't want to go to class in high school?" As she spoke, Dong-won was really immersed in her memories. She smiled and said bitterly, "That wonton shop is still open. Let's go there for dinner tonight. What do you think?" Dong-won suggested going to a restaurant because she wanted to buy more time for her nephew to spend with Yunjian. However, as she spoke, Dong-won could not help but reminisce about the stupid things she and Qin Yiru did back then. The two of them even learned to play truant from school just to eat a bowl of wontons. Qin Yiru had never approved of going to a restaurant. Perhaps it was because she had been through too much hardship that she could not change her habit. However, she more or less missed the place where she and Dong-won shared their memories. Okay. Qin Yiru agreed to it at once. The memories from the past were unforgettable. Now, they had grown up, gotten married, and had children. However, the scenery of the past was blurred in his mind. Some things can change at will. For example, Dong Ruan's husband's accident, or Qin Yiru's marriage to Yun Gang was so heartless. But the only thing that made people nostalgic was memories. "Alright, then let's go over now," Dong Ruan said with a smile. In fact, there were only 4 people in this group. Dong Ruan's son was studying in an elite school, while Yunjian's brother, Yun-yi, was studying in the school. After all, it was a key high school, and there was a lot of work to be done, so he rarely had time to rest. Dong Ruan's car was a black Audi sports car, which could only seat 2 people. Including Qin Yiru, Yunjian, Ce, and Dong Ruan herself, there were a total of 4 people. This meant that they had to drive 2 cars, and 2 people in 1 car. "Yiru, sit in my car. Let's talk about the past. How much I miss those days," Dong Ruan said as she pulled Qin Yiru's hand and walked to her Audi sports car. At the same time, she did not forget to reassure Qin Yiru and not to worry about Yunjian. He has a driver's license. He'll drive your Xiao Jian. The 2 young people will have something to talk about when they're together. Yunjian, who stood at the back, was dumbfounded. She was speechless. After Dong Ruan drove away with Qin Yiru, Ce came over. His handsome eyes and lips curled as he told her softly, "Let's go." Chapter 231. Dong Ruan started the engine and drove off in the Audi without waiting for Yunjian and Ce. By the time Yunjian got into Ce's Lamborghini, Dong Ruan had already driven a long distance away. Yunjian instantly felt as though she had been tricked into boarding a pirate ship. However, this wasn't the first time she had been in Ce's car. This time, however, she felt a little strange. When she turned her head and saw Ce's handsome face, she had the urge to blush. Fortunately, nothing happened along the way. Dong Ruan gave her location to Ce, so Ce quickly found the wonton shop they were at. This was an extremely old wonton shop. The decorations in the shop were from more than 10 or 20 years ago, which was already outdated for the current era. However, the shop's business had always been good, so the shop had been open until now and hadn't closed down. Many of the old shops in the surrounding area had already closed down or been sold, so this wonton shop was the only one that was still open. Above the door of the wonton shop, there were a few words written in block letters, Sue's Little Wonton. The owner of this wonton shop was an old lady in her 50s or 60s with the surname Sue. This shop was run by Old Lady Sue and her husband, but Old Lady Sue's husband had passed away a few years ago. When Ce stopped the car and walked into the shop with Yun Jian, Qin Yiro and Dong Wan were catching up with Old Lady Sue. In fact, Old Lady Sue knew Qin Yiro and Dong Wan. When they were young, they loved to come to Old Lady Sue's wonton shop the most. At that time, Old Lady Sue was only Qin Yiro and Dong Ruan's age. Back then, Dong Wan and Qin Yiro had played truant from school and realized that they had only brought enough money for a bowl of wonton. Later, Old Lady Sue asked her husband to make an extra bowl of wonton for them as a free gift. Dong Wan and Qin Yiro had always remembered this incident and would never forget it. When they were seated, Dong Wan deliberately pulled Qin Yiro to sit with her, forcing Yun Jian to sit with Ce. Yun Jian pursed her lips. Ce understood what his aunt meant, and a rare smile appeared on his handsome face. Here, 4 bowls of wonton. They're fresh out of the pot, and the stuffing is all made this morning. Come and have a taste. Let's see if it tastes the same as it did 10 years ago. Old Madame Sue appeared to be full of vigor. She placed bowls of wonton in front of the 4 people. Yun Jian picked up a spoon and blew on the wonton gently before swallowing it down with some soup. The smell was very fragrant and delicious. She narrowed her eyes. In her previous life, she had traveled all over the world and eaten countless delicacies. However, this was the first time she had eaten such a delicious wonton that was bland yet had a hint of natural flavor. This was even more delicious than those delicacies. Delicious. It tastes just as good as it did in the past. Qin Yiro and Dong Wan couldn't help but exclaim in admiration as they tasted the wonton delicately. Eat more if it's delicious. Old Madame Sue covered her mouth and laughed. She had always held on to this wonton shop. After her husband's death, it became her only tie. This place was the place where she and her husband reminisced. As old Madame Sue reminisced with Qin Yiro and Dong Wan, she couldn't help but steal a few glances at Yun Jian and Ce. In the end, old Madame Sue sighed and said, "These 2 children are so handsome. I think they look like husband and wife. These 2 children have a bright future ahead of them." This empty praise made Yun Jian choke on her wonton. She coughed a few times. "Are you okay?" Ce threw away the spoon in his hand and gently patted Yun Jian's back. Chapter 232. Old Madame Sue chuckled and looked at Ce like she had been there before, mumbling to herself, "Hey, Ce, you're right. It's great to be young." Yun Jian choked harder at that. Ce pushed the stool away and stood up with his tall and muscular frame to go behind Yun Jian to pat her back. "Where do you feel uncomfortable? Eat slowly. Don't choke." Ce's gentle tone surprised Dong Wan, who was his aunt. Her nephew had always prided himself as cold and aloof, usually not interested in women. But now, Dong Wan could not help gulping as she thought about it. He was really interested this time. She wanted to give herself a thumbs up. It seemed like she was right to matchmake Yun Jian and her nephew. No matter how clueless Qin Yiro was about love, she should have noticed it by now. In spite of it, Qin Yiro was concerned about Yun Jian and did not notice anything else. She stood up quickly and asked Yun Jian frantically, "Xiao Jian, how are you? You didn't choke, did you? Don't rush to eat the wontons." Slow down. Eat slowly. As she spoke, Chin Yiru wanted to help Ce pat Yunjian's back. Yiru's fine. It's normal for her to choke. Let my Ai do it. He's good at this. Let him pat her and she'll be done in no time. Dongwon pulled Chin Yiru and stood aside with a chuckle, covering her mouth. Chin Yiru, on the other hand, was completely relieved, thinking that Ce had learned some sort of massage. Yunjian recovered quickly, her cheeks flushed. Ce's hand had slid up and down her back just now. She could even feel his hand touching her skin and brushing past the strap of her bra. The part of her body that had never been touched before was tingling. Yunjian waved her hands quickly. I'm fine. I just choked accidentally. I'm fine now. Ce wore a charming smile. Old Madame Su was full of praise when she saw it. She was probably talking about Yunjian and Ce together. Chin Yiru was amused by her words. In spite of it, Chin Yiru did not think otherwise. To her, Ce was excellent, be it his family background, character, or looks. Her Xiao Jian was excellent in her heart too, but her family background was not good enough for someone like Ce. Otherwise, Chin Yiru would be more than willing to treat Ce as her son-in-law. Yunjian was still young, but from Chin Yiru's point of view, 15 years old was the age to talk about marriage in a few years in the countryside. After they were done with the wontons, Dongwon dragged Chin Yiru to walk around the street they used to frequent when they were younger. Without a doubt, Dongwon had created an atmosphere for Ce to be alone with Yunjian again. No matter how dumb Yunjian was, she could tell what Dongwon meant. She blushed but did not reject Ce's goodwill. She could feel that she was getting along with him and she did not dislike it. However, she did not know how to feel more deeply about it. Yunjian and Ce walked along a bustling street. Both of them were walking side by side. On the other hand, Ce, who stood beside Yunjian, had his hands in his pockets with a smirk, looking happy. Both of them walked around aimlessly. The street was downtown, so there were many people coming and going. Suddenly, a lively figure flashed past Yunjian's eyes. She was stunned when she saw who it was. The other party was taken aback as well. Wow! My Yunjian, what a coincidence to run into you here. The person was none other than Chu Ning. Chu Ning was a year older than Yunjian and was currently in her first year of high school. Chapter 233. What a coincidence, Yunjian said to Chu Ning with a squint. She did not dislike Chu Ning. In fact, she quite liked the girl's personality. Chu Ning had a lively personality and was usually carefree. Sometimes, she even gave people the impression that she was careless. However, when it came to serious matters, she would definitely rein in her unruly personality. After spending some time together, Chu Ning had changed from calling Yunjian's name directly to calling her Yunjian or Yunjian intimately. However, it was undeniable that the addition of the word son did indeed make people feel that the relationship between the two of them was much more intimate. Wow! Chu Ning, is this handsome guy your friend too? While Yunjian and Chu Ning were greeting each other, a girl who came with Chu Ning led the group of people closer to them. The girl stared at Ce in a daze, looking like she was smitten. No, he's from Yunjian's family. Chu Ning glared at the girl, seemingly unfriendly toward her. The girl was actually Chu Ning's buddy's girlfriend, Xiao Gizi. Chu Ning was quite manly to begin with. Even though she was a girl and looked sweet and lovely on the outside, she was still rather manly. However, Chu Ning had played with a bunch of boys since she was young and addressed them as her buddies. This group of buddies didn't treat her as a girl either. They usually played together and were very happy. Chu Ning was also a carefree person. Even though she was a girl, she was the most skilled in martial arts among her group of buddies. That was why Chu Ning caught Gu Yunjian's attention and was selected to be a candidate for the Advanced Special Forces. Today, Chu Ning was out on the streets with a group of her close friends. As for the other girls present, they were the girlfriends of Chu Ning's buddies. Xiao Gizi was Chu Ning's best buddy's girlfriend. Seeing Xiao Gizi asking about the handsome CE in front of her buddies, Chu Ning was naturally upset. She felt indignant for her buddy. How could he find such a flirtatious girlfriend? That was why she didn't treat Xiao Gizi nicely. Therefore, when Chu Ning said that CE belonged to Yunjian's family, it was a warning to Xiao Gizi that CE belonged to her friend and that he was already taken. Oh. Xiao Gizi agreed and stood to the side, but her eyes were still fixed on CE. Initially, she thought that her current boyfriend was handsome. However, she regretted it when she saw CE. It turned out that a truly handsome man was not like her current boyfriend. Xiao Gizi's boyfriend, who was also Chu Ning's best friend, was called Meng Xiao. Meng Xiao didn't notice that his girlfriend, Xiao Gizi, was acting differently at this time. On the contrary, Meng Xiao was an enthusiastic person. He invited Yunjian and CE enthusiastically. Since everyone knows each other, why don't we walk together? We're on the same side anyway. Once Meng Xiao said that, Chu Ning nodded vigorously and told Yunjian, yeah, Yunjian, let's walk together, okay? Chu Ning even stuck her tongue out and winked at Yunjian. Yunjian nodded under Chu Ning's hopeful gaze and smiled before turning to CE. Why don't you go back first? I'll go out for a walk. Old Madame Sue's words kept replaying in her mind the entire way. Her cheeks were flushed pink, making her look irresistible. This caused her to blush whenever she saw CE, so she wanted him to go back first. Chapter 234. Hee, since you're Xiaoning's friend, you're my friend too. Just bring your boyfriend along. You don't have to be shy. Meng Xiao looked at Yunjian and said to Yunjian with a knowing look. This was because Chu Ning had told Xiao Gizi that CE belonged to Yunjian's family. This sentence made Meng Xiao immediately think that Yunjian and CE were a couple. After hearing Meng Xiao's words, Yunjian's rosy cheeks became even redder. However, her facial expression did not change much. He's not my boyfriend, Yunjian clarified. CE's smile relaxed a little, but he was not angry. Instead, he looked at everyone with his handsome side profile. He continued Yunjian's words, indeed, he's not now. But he'll be soon. CE's words were very straightforward. It was hard to imagine that someone like him would say such ambiguous words. However, when these words came out of CE's mouth, it was as simple as asking, have you eaten today? Yunjian's eyelids twitched violently. She did not expect CE to really say it out loud. Previously, she had seen CE's actions towards her, but he had never said anything about it. His words just now really gave her a shock. Yunjian did not know that CE had never been in contact with women. Ever since he was young, he had always hated women. Once he fell in love, it would never change for the rest of his life. Moreover, once he found out about his feelings, he would definitely not hide. It was precisely because of this that CE dared to say it out loud and do it in front of everyone. Chu Ning took a deep breath and was the first to step forward to ease the awkward atmosphere. Alright, let's hurry and go. Before the sun sets, let's take a walk around. Saying that, Chu Ning put an arm around Yunjian's shoulder and led the way. At this moment, Xiao Gizi, who was walking at the back, took a few glances at the tall and handsome CE who was walking beside Yunjian, then at her boyfriend, Meng Xiao. She suddenly felt that Meng Xiao was even less outstanding. Why? Xiao Gizi dug her fingernails into the flesh of her palms. Why can't I be the first person to meet such a handsome man? In 2 days' time for Yunjian and the rest to go on a mission. Gu Junjian had specifically instructed that they were not allowed to touch many things when they went on a mission 2 days later. Therefore, Chu Ning dragged Yunjian around as a way to have some fun before they went on a mission. At this moment, the sky was already dark and the neon lights on the streets were lit up. It's getting dark and it's quite boring to walk around here. I have a good idea. There's going to be a motorcycle race on the mountain road today. There are some big shots that we don't usually see. I heard that there are a few international motorcycle racers. Do you want to go and take a look? After strolling around the streets, they didn't see anything new. Just as everyone was about to say goodbye and go home, a boy with a righteous face stood up and boasted. Are you serious? Is this news accurate? Immediately, another guy chimed in. In fact, other than Chu Ning, the other girls were the girlfriends of Chu Ning's friends. In front of their girlfriends, this group of guys naturally wanted to show their most heroic and knowledgeable side. Chapter 235. I won't be going, Yunjian told Chu Ning with a smile. Come on, Yunjian, let's go and have some fun. Chu Ning tugged at the corner of her shirt and winked at Yunjian, whispering to Yunjian, we'll be going on a mission in 2 days. Let's use this time to go and have some fun. Yunjian glanced at Ce beside her before nodding at Chu Ning. She did not want to continue shopping, but once she thought of walking alone with Ce after parting ways with Chu Ning and the rest, her heart skipped a beat. At the same time, she felt bitter. Hence, she agreed to go with Chu Ning and the rest. As for Ce, he had no objections. His twinkling eyes were trained on Yunjian, his handsome face drawing attention. It was undeniable that there were plenty of eyes on Ce along the way. Let's go then. Chu Ning held Yunjian's hand like they were close friends and strutted ahead. Mountain Winding Road was situated on a mountain not far away. As the name suggested, the mountain was called Mountain Winding and the road was called Mountain Winding Road for short. At the same time, this road was built halfway up Pan Mountain. Some of Longmen City's rich kids, noble families, and big bosses liked to play exciting games. Like racing, motorcycle racing, and so on. Usually, these exciting games were played on this road in Pan Shan. Hence, there was another name for the road, Life and Death Road. Yunjian and the rest walked there. The night breeze was chilly. Ce stood beside Yunjian to block the wind for her. It wasn't a long walk from the shopping area to the winding mountain road. By the time Yunjian and the rest arrived at Mountain Winding Road, some of the spectators were already cheering noisily. Look over there. The righteous guy who suggested for them to watch the motorcycle race shouted excitedly. His name was Situ Dun. Hearing Situ Dun's shout, everyone's gaze shifted to the scene. They saw a man in his mid-20s waving at the crowd with a helmet in his hand. He's the international motorcycle racer, Lin Wei. Lin Wei is the pride of Country Z. He's only 25 this year, but he's already the captain of an international motorcycle racing team. Not only is he good at motorcycle racing, he's a top racer too. Situ Dun pointed at the man who was the center of attention and introduced him to Yunjian and the rest excitedly. Situ Dun's words were tinged with pride as he spoke. The way he boasted made it seem as if Lin Wei was himself. It sounds amazing. A girl couldn't help but look over there with admiration when she heard it. When Situ Dun heard this, he immediately felt proud of himself. The reason he suggested for everyone to come here was to show off that he was knowledgeable. A guy like Situ Dun did not have any other specialties. His only hobby was to study these things. At this moment, Situ Dun raised his head like a little swan. Especially in front of CE, he wanted to show that he was more outstanding. In fact, Situ Dun had always disliked CE ever since he came out. He was not like Meng Xiao, that fool, who would really welcome CE. CE was more outstanding than all of them combined. When he came, all the girls' attention was on him. Situ Dun could not wait to show his best side. He wanted to be better than CE. Situ Dun did not notice that Yun Jian was squinting her eyes at Lin Wei, who was the center of attention. She was wondering why Lin Wei looked so familiar. Wasn't Lin Wei ranked 4th on the assassin ranking? Lin Wei was also an assassin from the Inhun organization. Chapter 236. She turned her head and saw Ce pursing his lips slightly. He felt Yun Jian's gaze and turned to face her. His gentle voice made Yun Jian's heart skip a beat. "What's wrong?" His magnetic and mellow voice was pleasant to the ears. "Nothing." Yun Jian was like a student who was caught red-handed by the teacher. She turned her head and faced Ce from the side. Her cheeks flushed red in the next moment. She already knew that Ce was the leader of an Hun organization. That meant that Lin Wei was undoubtedly his subordinate. Yun Jian knew Lin Wei as well. The reason why she could recognize Lin Wei at first glance was that when she was slaying God in her past life, Lin Wei was her superior who trained her in an Hun organization. Lin Wei was decisive and ruthless when it came to killing. In her previous life, it was under Lin Wei's training that she developed her abilities. Perhaps others did not know that Lin Wei was just an ordinary person on the surface. He was an international motorcycle racer. However, he was secretly the 4th assassin on the international assassin chart. Perhaps others did not know, but Yun Jian knew very well. There were 4 leaders in an Hun organization. The 4 of them were Shuang, Adam, and Immerse Senator, and the last person of the 4 was Lin Wei. Lin Wei was also one of the 4 leaders in an Hun organization. At the same time, Lin Wei was the most mysterious of the 4 leaders. Even Yun Jian had to investigate for a long time before she found out that Lin Wei was one of the 4 leaders in an Hun organization. Yun Jian could not deny that Lin Wei was only ranked 4th on the assassin chart. She was personally trained by Lin Wei. Although she had surpassed Lin Wei in her previous life, she knew Lin Wei's abilities well. This seemingly harmless man was actually ranked 2nd on the assassin chart. At this moment, she finally understood that Lin Wei was Ce's subordinate. It's starting, the motorcycle race is starting. Situ Dun suddenly pointed at the set excitedly. He interrupted everyone's thoughts and made everyone look at the set. Yun Jian also looked over, only to see that the burly and strong Lin Wei had already put on his helmet and sat on his motorcycle with 1 foot on the ground. With the referee's gunshot, the motorcycle rushed out like an arrow. The atmosphere at the scene reached its climax. Situ Dun followed the crowd and shouted, "Lin Wei, come on. Lin Wei will win." His voice was so loud as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know that he was Lin Wei's fan. The result was naturally indisputable, and Lin Wei won. Yun Jian was not surprised at all by this result. After all, she was taught by Lin Wei, so she naturally knew what Lin Wei was capable of. A long time after Lin Wei reached the finish line, the motorcyclists finally caught up and reached the finish line one after another. "Ah, my motorcycle is out of control. Help!" At this moment, a black motorcycle rushed out from the circular road and rushed into the boiling crowd. For a moment, the crowd screamed and couldn't dodge in time. Some were even knocked to the side and were sent flying. The motorcycle continued to move forward and finally rushed straight towards the crowd where Yunjian and the others were. Ah! Xiao Gizi was so scared that her face turned pale, and she was the first to scream. Chu Ning's face also turned pale. Although she had been practicing her skills, the motorcycle was very fast, and with the added wind, it was very strong. She didn't have the strength to resist at all. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Just as she was about to make a move, a tall figure flashed past her. By the time everyone turned around, the motorcycle had already been kicked to the ground by the tall figure who had flashed out. All the resistance and inertia of the motorcycle suddenly stopped. When the crowd came to their senses, they were extremely shocked. It was Ce. Yunjian was taken aback as well. She knew that Ce was good, but she didn't expect him to be so fast. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.